Um, the administration has asked us to go into closed session, and we're going into closed session under 2C2, which is collective negotiation matters between the district and its employees or their representatives. And so let us do a roll call to go into closed.
Sellis.
Yes.
Wojtovich.
Yes.
Sotos.
Yes.
Pearl.
Yes.
Kennedy.
Yes.
Riles.
Yes.
Lubinsky, yes.
Okay.
Wait, sorry, I might not have been paying attention, but was there a motion? And
No,
a
yes,
second?
and
Did
that's
we-
why I need to
Yeah,
go back. Okay, so we are going back. All right, so the administration has asked us, thank you, Carol, to go into closed session under 2C2, collective negotiating matters. Is there a motion to do so?
So move.
Second.
Okay, so Tom had the motion, Nikki had the second, and let's roll call again.
Sellis.
Yes.
Wojtovich.
Yes.
Sotos.
Yes.
Pearl.
Yes.
Kennedy.
Yes.
Riles.
Yes.
Lubinsky. Yes. Present. Here. Quorum carries. Roll.
Okay, and let's make sure we are speaking into our mics so Gareth can hear us as he's joining on the phone. Okay, so we are now going to go into closed session. All right, today is Thursday, May 19th. We are here for the regular meeting of the Ridge-Niles School District 64. The board was in closed session for about 20 minutes, talking about 2C2, collective negotiating matters between the district and its employees or their representatives. So why don't we start with a roll call?
Riles.
Here.
Sotos.
Here.
Wojtovich.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Pearl.
Here.
Lubinsky here. Sellis.
Here.
Quorum carries. All are present.
All right, thank you. All right, let us stand for the pledge. And Larry, would you like to lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, continuing on, as far as opening remarks, I don't know about you guys, but I feel that May is such a busy month. I don't know if you're feeling that. It's a great month because there's a lot of end of the year celebrations, and we celebrated our teachers and staff earlier in the month, kind of coinciding with Cinco de Mayo, but it's a busy month, and there's some students transitioning elementary to middle. Tom has a student transitioning from middle to high school. I have a student transitioning from high school to college. Okay, all right, so busy time, but it's an exciting time as well. So just want to thank everyone for we're going to end the school year this month, so thanks for all your work, or early in June. Okay, and now we have a special recognition, and Eric, why don't you lead that?
Thank you. I'm actually going to turn it over to Lisa Halverson, the principal of Jefferson, and she's going to take us from here.
Good evening. I'm pleased to be here this evening to honor one of our Jefferson students, Levi Hanna. Levi recently received the 2022 Outstanding Student Technology Award from the Infinitec Assistive Technology Coalition and was honored at an awards banquet on April 28th. Levi has overcome medical challenges and has a disability that makes verbal communication challenging. For the past year, Levi has been using his dedicated communication device to build sentences with picture icons to make connections with others and share what he learns at school. Levi has an amazing personality and many interests that he's able to share with the use of his communication device. As you see this evening, Levi is very social and driven to communicate. This drive to connect has allowed Levi to make an amazing growth with the use of his device. Earlier this year, I was giving a prospective parent a tour of the school, and I walked into Levi's classroom. Levi immediately made eye contact with the two of us, and you could see that he wanted to share something. His teacher recognized that he wanted to say something, so she expected him to use his communication device to share what was on his mind. Levi shared that he had a dog named Scarlet. Actually, the dog is his nanny's dog, but, you know, who's going to argue with this little guy? Anyone who spends time with Levi is immediately enamored with him and realizes that he has great potential and will go far in life. I think his teacher, Mrs. Hallerduff, captured it all when she says, and I quote, "Levi is a force, and our whole class communicates and connects better with each other by virtue of being part of his world." To our little mayor of Jefferson School, thank you for being part of our lives. We look forward to seeing you continue on your educational journey and know you'll accomplish great things. Levi is prepared to say something to the group as well.
Want to do your speech? Go ahead. Do it again.
Miss Pam, Miss Sarah, Miss Amy, Mrs. Hallerduff, Mrs. Tooley, thank you.
Are you being shy? You have two more. Two more.
My talker makes me feel happy.
Yeah, you have one more.
Miss Pam, Miss Sarah, Miss Amy, Mrs. Hallerduff, Mrs. Tooley, thank you.
Here, do this last one. Do your last one. Good.
I like my talker.
And tell everybody bye.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Levi. We will see what you will be mayor of next, so, since your future is bright. All right, now we're going to invite up Dr. Alimo to introduce us and tell us about Emerson School.
Good evening. My name is Samantha Alimo. I'm the principal here at Emerson Middle School. I'm actually not going to be speaking to you too much tonight because I'm proud to introduce two of our distinguished 8th graders, Lucia Fuentes and Samantha Hill. They will be talking to you tonight about an award that Emerson recently won. Samantha and Lucia were two students that participated in our student panel along with about 15 other Emerson students. So I am proud to present them and let them give you a little glimpse into Emerson this year.
Good evening, Dr. Olson, Dr. Pearl, Board of Education members, Central Office administrators, and the District 64 public.
We are proud to stand here tonight to celebrate the achievements of our school. My name is Samantha Hill.
And my name is Lucia Fuentes. We are both in 8th grade here at Emerson.
Tonight we will be showing you the amazing things Emerson has worked on this year. This school year, Emerson's staff worked to enhance its services to our students and reach new goals.
This year, Emerson was designated for the 5th time as a National Forum School to Watch. We are proud to present this award in front of Dr. Olson, the Board of Education, and the District 64 public tonight.
To give you some background, this organization is a part of the Illinois Horizon Schools to Watch network as associated with the Association of Illinois Middle Schools. Lucia and I are proud to say that we are part of the process as two 8th grade students who participated in the Horizon student panel.
Principals from around the state interviewed us along with other students to understand our perspectives of Emerson. To say the least, they were impressed with our work.
Schools to Watch are focused on continuous school improvement. These exemplary schools participate in evaluations conducted by representatives from the National Forum and engage in ongoing self-evaluation using the Schools to Watch rubric. Schools participate in the Association of Illinois Middle Grade Schools, AIMS, networking events, present at association workshops and conferences, and provide leadership as a part of the AIMS network. Schools are recognized at the National Forum Annual Schools to Watch Conference in Washington, D.C.
This summer, our industrial technology coach, Mr. Angel Villarreal, and one of our PE teachers, Miss Amelia Pager, will present at this conference to showcase our wonderful advisory program at Emerson and the effect it's having on our students. These staff members, along with Ms. Jackie Behoff and the Emerson administrators, led this initiative to receive this award. In addition, these members, the following staff, were also involved in the process. Please help us recognize them.
The award was based upon 4 distinct categories. The first you see here is academic excellence. Emerson was rated an average of 3.7 out of 4 in this area of academic excellence for its ability to provide students with a unique schedule, supportive academic environment, and cross-disciplinary connections.
Hi, my name is Charles Dan. I'm an 8th grader here at Emerson Middle School. My teachers support my learning by helping me when I struggle with a problem. For example, the other day I got points off on a test, but then I explained it to my teacher, and she explained to me what I did wrong, so I was able to do it better the next time.
The next area is developmental responsiveness. Emerson was rated 3.6 out of 4 in this area due to the structure of our advisory, elective program, connection to the community, and social emotional learning, and its support it offers to students.
Hi, I'm Samantha Cruz. I'm a 7th grader at Emerson Middle School, and homeroom on Wednesdays helps me increase the study realistic because I can catch up on any missing or late work that I have for other classes, which really helps boost my grade up. And during second step Mondays, we are able to learn how to handle stressful situations and calm our emotions, and we're able to figure out how to help the students by empathizing with them and being able to look at a situation through their perspective.
Oh, I'm Austin Missouri, and I'm a 6th grader at Emerson. I actually go to the after-school program on Future Leaders, and I'd like to say some stuff about it. The activities really brought out some undergrad, so that's something, I guess. The activities are all 2 ways of immediately fun. Like one time, we built a whole castle out of spaghetti and marshmallows. The activities also allow for a bunch of social work. Sometimes I bring my friends down there, and we have a lot of fun together with activities and stuff that they have in common. It's also a beautiful place that is nice and calm. No one really notices or stuff like that. And it's also one of the few safe places that I actually am comfortable with, and that I can say my opinion, and no one will be judged. And basically, no one judges at these places. Nice and calm.
Next, the committee looked at the category of social equity. Emerson was also rated 3.6 out of 4 in this area. The panel was impressed with the connections between students and staff, the culture and climax of the school, and staff relationships.
Hi, my name is Peter Cortinas. I'm an 8th grade here at Emerson. The environment here with the staff is very nice. Everyone's very respectful and makes me feel welcome. For example, Mr. Spielberg, I will talk to him about Star Wars, and Mr. Domano, I will talk to him about sports. I'm going to miss my 8th grade teacher this year, and I hope you guys have a good summer.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Newman, and I am a 6th grade language arts teacher here at Emerson Middle School. I just wanted to talk about the wonderful culture, climate, and staff relationships that have been established here at Emerson. I feel very fortunate to work at a school where all staff members share the same vision and goals for creating a positive learning working environment. Here, our administrators and staff have created a family dynamic by always lending each other a hand and creating a safe and respectful space for openness, discussion, and collaboration. The past few years have had its share of challenges, but our administrators have uplifted, encouraged, and supported us through obstacles that the pandemic has brought with such empathy and compassion. The staff here have given each other valuable advice, shared laughs, and celebrated each other's victories no matter how small. At
some mornings, which I really was able to take advantage of this year, these professional developments in the morning were very short clippings of different activities, collaboration, questioning, techniques that I was super easily able to input right in my classrooms, even the next day.
As outgoing 8th grade students of Emerson in 264, we are proud to say, we are Emerson.
Nice job. Thank you for your time tonight. We wish you a wonderful summer.
On behalf of our assistant principals, Mrs. Shulman and Mr. Kotvis and I, we thank you for your time tonight. And I wish that those videos of the kids were staged, but those are originals, as Angel will let you know. So thank you.
All right, great to see other students highlighted through your presentation. We'll see where you guys are going to be serving as mayors as well. Okay, all right. Next on our agenda, we're going to have the COVID-19 and update and prevention strategies. Eric?
Thank you. I think it's a good sign of where we are when I think this is going to be my shortest report. We continue to monitor our COVID data. While we had plateaued for 3 weeks of 50, 52, and 53, we did make a jump up to 64, but then last week it was 65, so we, at least for 2 weeks, have hit another plateau. I'm, again, not concerned about the numbers of where we are at this point. I think everything that we have in place makes sense, and we really only have 2 weeks of school left. So we will continue to monitor and watch it, but I believe we will end the school year perfectly fine, unrelated to COVID. Thanks.
How about comments or questions from the board?
Just a quick comment. I was in, I think it was Field this week, and I noticed even the plastic panels from around the secretaries as you walk in was down as well. So everything appeared very normal, and it was good to see that.
It makes it look so big, doesn't it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. So it's good. It's very good.
Mm-hmm. All right, other questions, comments? Okay. All right. All right, now at this point, we are going to transition to public comments. This is the point of the meeting where we welcome public comments. Each speaker is given 3 minutes to address the board. Comments may be made on almost any matter related to the operation of schools, but we ask that you refrain from making comments concerning individual students or staff members. The board uses this time to listen to community questions and concerns, but will not respond immediately to requests for information. Additionally, the board cannot take formal action on non-agenda items. Contact the board president by email if you wish to discuss your topic further. Please come forward to the microphone and state your name and address if you're comfortable for the minutes. All right, so are there any public comments? Thank you. Come to the podium.
Thank you. My name is Carter Esterling. I'm a District 64 parent. I know that for educators, summer is a time to reflect and review on the year that just ended and the year to come. And I would urge this board, like other boards in suburban Cook County, to spend the summer creating a proactive plan to be ready to add and remove mitigations based on relevant data in Cook County. This approach should be layered, not just about masks, but with regard to distancing at lunch, with regard to ventilation, with regard to guidelines as to window opening. There needs to be some clarity for other people to rely on that comes from the board. Otherwise, we have confusion, we have frustration, and as we saw in February here, we have a tremendous amount of anger that ends up being expressed towards the board. So I think the best way to approach that over the summer is to get out in front of it. And as far as the numbers cited by Dr. Olson here, respectfully, I think that those are baseless numbers. I don't know where we are getting the idea that there's only 50 cases in a district in a given entire week. That's just, we know that COVID is much more rampant than that in the country right now, but we're not doing any testing. We're not doing shield testing. I don't know where the district thinks that it has reliable numbers at this point. And I would remind the board that your role is to serve all children in this district using facts and evidence, not feelings. Thank you.
All right, thank you. How about other public comments? Okay. All right, let's look at the agenda. And are there any changes, additions, amendments, deletions?
So I have a proposed amendment. Can we move the personnel report, that's A6, in case in case anyone's waiting for that, do you want to just move that up after A3? So Joel's here. Just so if someone wanted to leave earlier for the personnel report, so can you just move A6 up to after A3?
So you're saying to move A6 in between A3 and A4?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, anyone? I think that sounds fine, Carol. Okay, and I think the other change, Gareth mentioned, we are going to pull out of the consent agenda our second reading for the policies, and I think we're going to wait to present that at the next meeting.
Actually, we only need to pull out 2:230.
Okay.
That's the one that Gareth, Phyllis, and I want to look at. And then also, it's up in Press 109, so we'll be coming to the board with changes anyway.
Okay, thank you. So 2:230, we'll pull that one out of the consent agenda. And we'll get that next time. All right, anything else? All right. All right, so we will move on to recognizing our tenured teachers, and Joel is going to come on up for that.
So it's good to be back here at this time of year to recognize our teachers who are ending their probationary time in District 64. Just as a reminder for the Board of Education, teachers are on a probationary period for the first 4 years that they are in a school district. It's during this time that they are evaluated twice as much as a tenured teacher at minimum. The scrutiny that they are under is pretty intense during this time, because it's the time when a district is looking to determine if we're going to make the long commitment to keep them here, and hopefully where they want to make the commitment to us, and we will have a very long relationship with these teachers for years to come, and hopefully to the point where they will retire with us. The teachers who are receiving tenure at the end of this school year have had a really interesting 4 years process. Unlike many of our other teachers and many of us who are sitting here in the audience today, we had the typical kids come in, they're with us every day, for 176 days for 4 years, and we see them matriculate through the system. These teachers have lived through 4 different school years, from a regular year to a hybrid year a remote year to a hybrid year to a year where we're kind of normal, but we still have some things going on, where there were mitigations and social distancing and things along that nature that impacted the things that they did in the classroom. So it has been anything but typical for our probationary teachers here in District 64. But the list of people here have done a phenomenal job. They have risen to the challenge of the difficult times that we are in. They have really risen to the challenge of meeting the expectations of not only the administration, but their colleagues, and of the parents and students in this community. We're so thrilled and honored to be able to take off the label of probationary teacher and to bestow upon them the title of tenured teacher in District 64. We will be going out to the schools and giving them a certificate here before the year is out. But I'd like to recognize these individuals by reading their names tonight in honor of them. And the first one's going to be interesting. The first one is Sandy Blethen from Carpenter. Sandy is actually one who was tenured. Then she quit being a full-time teacher and then came back to us as a full-time teacher. And she'll be leaving us again because she'll be retiring soon. So it's an interesting one, but we're happy that Sandy came back, and we're thrilled to recognize her at least for the remainder of this year and say to her she's a tenured teacher in District 64. We also have Jennifer Coffin from Roosevelt School, Julie Collada from Washington, Alyssa Lestrania from Lincoln, Alexis Lombardi from Roosevelt, Amy Lynch from Field, Andrea Maggiore from Emerson, Amanda Matoka from Washington, Carly McCabe from Field School, Caroline Meredith from Jefferson, Samantha Meza from Carpenter, Madeline Odell from Emerson, Ming Tu Nguyen from Emerson, Kevin Pankow from Lincoln, Katerina Randazzo from Lincoln, Carly Thornton from Field, Lauren Willis from Field, Nicole Winneck from Emerson, and Ivana Whippich from Lincoln. So I hope that you would join me in congratulating these teachers as they obtain tenure in School District 64. Thank you. I think I'm sticking around.
Yes, stay right there, Joel. All right. It's exciting that we can have those teachers as a part of our tenured staff. And now we'll move to the personnel report. Anything you'd like to share on that, Joel?
Only that it is revised. There was one addition for a resignation that was added. Otherwise, there are no changes on the personnel report for tonight.
Anyone questions, comments on there? All right. Let's take a vote.
Wait,
Can
I propose?
Motion? Yes.
I move that the Board of Education and Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge, Niles, Illinois, approve the personnel report dated May 19th, 2022, noting that the personnel report is based on the recommendation of the superintendent and not upon the board's direct knowledge regarding any of the specific individuals selected for employment.
Second.
All right, Gareth had the motion, Nikki had the second. Any further discussion from the board?
If anyone we're hiring is here, do you want to stand up and say hi? I wasn't sure if anyone's here. Okay, they're not here.
That was a good idea, though. Yeah. All right. Maybe they're listening on, so
Yes.
yeah, it could be. All right, now we are ready for a roll call vote.
Okay. Wojtovich?
Yes.
Kennedy?
Yes.
Sotos?
Yes.
Pearl?
Yes.
Lubinsky, yes. Sellis?
Yes.
Riles?
Yes.
Motion carries. They're all hired.
Okay. All right,
you.
Joel, you are set. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have a Spanish resource adoption, and Lori is going to share more about that.
Perfect. Well, thank you for the opportunity tonight to talk about our Spanish resource adoption. I'm very lucky to be here with Senora Rodriguez, Shannon Rodriguez, who is our World Language Curriculum Specialist.
Nice to meet you all.
So I thought I'd just start with a little bit of background. Over the past 2 years, we've been reviewing middle school Spanish resources. About 70% of our students in District 64 take a world language as an elective class in 7th and 8th grade. A little more than half of our students select Spanish. And if they complete the elective course over the course of 7th and 8th grade, they actually are eligible to enroll in Spanish 2 in high school. So it's a nice stepping stone for them as they transition to District 207. So at our last board meeting, when we talked about our elementary math adoption, I explained a little bit about how curriculum review is ongoing and it has several different stages. So our world language teachers, under Shannon's leadership, have the opportunity to meet monthly on our early release Wednesdays to dive into best practices in teaching world language. And every subject area for educators is guided by a professional organization. And the organization that guides world language teachers is called the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. And you know how we love our acronyms in education, so we just call it ACTFL, which is a mouthful, ACTFL. So in addition to team-based professional learning, in the fall of 2019, we actually had an educator from ACTFL come out and work with our world language team on the standards for world languages. And also, we learned more about ACTFL's 6 core practices. And we use those core practices for program analysis. And then the last stage of curriculum review is really learning more about the curriculum by implementing it, by piloting it, right? And seeing what student engagement looks like and what student achievement looks like. So world language instruction has changed a lot since we were in school, and ACTFL has 6 core practices for world language teachers. So the first that I'll just point your attention to is backward design. So teachers should plan instruction based on their learning goals for students. And this is actually best practice in all areas of the curriculum, not just in world language. The second is that students should really spend 90% or more of class time working in the target language. So almost bell to bell, and I see this when I walk past our world language classrooms, students should be speaking in Spanish, writing in Spanish, listening to Spanish, reading Spanish. Also, teachers should be using authentic cultural texts, so scaffolding appropriately as needed, but they should be reading texts that were originally written in Spanish, not just translated into Spanish, and other authentic texts like advertisements or even cartoons. Fourth, world languages should focus on interpersonal communication, right? And teachers should design lessons that really target that. Fifth, students should learn grammar in context. And sixth, oral corrective feedback should be used to guide students. So basically what this means is that we teach world language now in the same way that we acquired language as a child. So as a parent, picture a child saying, dog ranning, right? And as a parent you would say, is that dog running? Right? Is that dog brown? Is that dog big? Do you like that dog? Right? So you kind of extend the conversation with a lot of the 6 pillars, right? You're providing oral corrective feedback, you're teaching grammar in context, you're making it about interpersonal communication. You're not saying, gosh, you know, that sentence didn't have a verb, and here's a worksheet, right? So it's just shifted to really the way that we acquire language. Of course, there is explicit instruction around language structure and grammar, but it's not what drives the lesson. So those core ACTFL practices helped us identify our key look-fors in a program. And so as a team, we analyzed 2 Spanish programs. And we looked at whether or not they had meaningful communication activities, whether or not there was authentic representation of culture. We looked for target vocabulary around a variety of topics linking to other subject areas in the curriculum. We looked for higher order thinking activities. And then from a teacher perspective, we really knew we wanted a robust tech platform, and we wanted assessments that helped us gauge where students were in their learning so that we could differentiate learning. So based on our analysis, we ultimately selected a program called Encuentros by Vista Higher Learning. We selected that program to pilot, And 2 teachers volunteered to pilot that program beginning in August of this year and continuing, right? Or September? October. Beginning in October and continuing. And as they piloted, and Shannon was one of them, they reported back to the world language team about their experiences.
And I can just touch base a little bit to that. We also created a learning team as part of the district initiative this year. So besides just meeting that one at our one world language department meeting, we also created a learning team where we brought on the Emerson teachers, because myself and my co-teacher, Eliza Fazilov, we both piloted, and we brought in the 2 Emerson teachers that also will be joining us in teaching Encuentros, should it be adopted. And we were able to connect and start creating activities. They helped us because we were kind of teaching, looking over the materials and teaching it right away, and just trying all different types of activities and using the V-text, and as Lori will explain a little bit more. So they were actually very helpful to us in getting us some additional things added while we were teaching it and piloting it.
So our learning team structure, you might remember, 7 or 8 Wednesdays a year, our teachers have the opportunity to come together in what we call a professional learning community, or a learning team. So they identify a topic that they want to explore to enhance their practice. And Shannon's learning team, as she said, focused on the piloting of these materials. So we're recommending Encuentros for a number of reasons. First, alignment. It was very clearly aligned to the ACTFL core practices. It's also the resource that is used in District 207 for Spanish. So it provides a very seamless transition for our students as they graduate from Spanish 1 and move to Spanish 2. And it's aligned, it's published by the same company as our French resource. So the platform, the digital platform, while there are nuances to both programs, is similar. And so they have the opportunity to support each other with navigating that technology. There are differentiated lessons. The teachers reported that the students were very engaged, very interested in the program. And as I mentioned, it has a robust digital platform.
And can I just add that our students at Lincoln, and also they had to go from one textbook, and these are 7th graders just starting in level 1. They went from one textbook to another seamlessly. I said, you guys are my guinea pigs. They said they didn't mind. I always use that as an analogy just to let them know. I said, you guys are starting out something so new for us. And it was nice to welcome their opinions and what they thought about it. Senora, I don't know if I like that activity. Okay, well, maybe we don't have to do that one this year, that type of thing. So we encourage their feedback as well, because they're the ones using the book too.
So, and Shannon and I thought we'd just share a quick video clip from the program so that you can see what might launch the kids into having an interpersonal conversation. So Dan, can you just cue up that 40 seconds for us? Thanks, Dan. That's perfect.
So awkward.
Thanks, Dan. So I do think that, Dan, thanks.
That's good.
Thank you. So this kind of video actually is a little girl who's creating a film, right? And she walks around and she interviews all of her family members about their characteristics. And our students in Spanish have access to a word bank and some vocabulary that they've been working with. So then they take this language model and have conversations with each other. And the videos, Shannon and I like them. Some of them are a little silly, and the middle school kids, they eat that up. So Shannon did that lesson with her kids.
I did,
don't know
and we actually, you know what, my co-teacher and I, we created, you know, a worksheet with some questions and had them answer and write it out in Spanish. And that was just so, we had to play it a few times because they're also listening to different dialects of the language. You know, I believe those two are from Colombia, and Colombians speak very quickly and have a different, you know, dialect to somewhat of a Puerto Rican speaker or a Mexican speaker. So it's really nice, it was nice for them to hear different, you know, aspects of what types of, different languages as well. So not just hearing me speak it all the time. So
that was one of the things that we looked for in the program, because it is an authentic speakers, right? An authentic cultural context. So tonight we're asking the board to approve the adoption of a 6-year subscription to the online platform of Encuentros. And the total cost of that is just under $92,000 for all 6 years. It includes 2 implementation workshops for teachers, a class set of student editions for teachers. So our students have access to their books digitally, but we also provide them with a class set when they're here at school. And then student workbooks for this school year. At this time, we don't have a multi-year workbook subscription. We're going to use the workbooks this year and see how we like them, see if they're a real benefit to the students. And if we do like them, we'll either purchase them annually, as we have in the past with programs, or we'll work to secure a multi-year, like a bundle discount. And so we'll continue, of course, with professional development for our teachers. And we typically use Title II and Title IV funds to support PD. So does anyone have any questions for me or for Shannon while we have her here?
Shannon, you mentioned that hi, how are you? Thanks for coming. You mentioned that you created a worksheet. Was this something different from the workbooks? Just something
Absolutely.
Extra? Okay.
You know, we do have, the VTEX has a wide variety of resources, activities, but sometimes we like to go out of the bubble, and that's kind of that comprehensible input type of instruction where we wanted them to watch, listen, and then see what they could put down in the target language. I didn't care if it was a complete sentence, even if they jotted down a couple answers, and they did great. So that's what I meant by creating a worksheet alongside of that.
So is there any grammar or verb conjugation or any of that involved? Because
Oh,
that's the old school way. I'm just wondering how different is this
Oh,
from
no,
what we
I'm
learned
an
before?
old school.
Okay.
I believe in grammar. And,
Okay, good.
and it's funny that you say that, and I have one little side note. I was introducing, it's called a desafío, and a desafío is kind of like a mini unit. And it starts off with a little story, and we read the story out loud. And I just said, guys, I'm not going to, be the grammar police, but I just introduced 4 different grammar points to you, and you didn't even know it. And it was cool because it encompassed demonstrative adjectives, the verb gustar, which is to like, and then there were 2 others that I can't think of right off the top of my head, but we are definitely gearing, the grammar is entwined.
And then you mentioned, Lori, the word bank. I mean, is this something separate, or is it similar to like a because I envision, you used to have a little dictionary that you had to bring in addition to. So is all that built in? Like, how would, is there a dictionary function and all that within the program? Or
There's not
what's the word
necessarily a
bank?
dictionary function, but as the teachers introduce videos like that, they'll sometimes preview vocabulary with kids to sharpen their to sharpen their ears so that they can pick up the words as they watch the videos. So they're new Spanish speakers, right? Yeah. So if Shannon introduces, like in that particular video, there are lots of adjectives because people are describing themselves, right? So if Shannon shares a number of words with them, they can listen for them in those videos.
So in addition to the workbooks, do you envision a bunch of dictionaries or just a few dictionaries? Do you even use
We
those?
have dictionaries, but we don't need them.
Right. Okay. And I guess they could Google it now, right, too? Which we couldn't.
Not a good Google. No.
I have a question.
Sure.
I don't know how often we turn over Spanish teachers in the district, but if we bring in a Spanish teacher from somewhere else to the district, is Encuentros going to do a workshop for the new teacher?
Yes, we will be doing our first Encuentros workshop.
Yes, Upon approval of the curriculum, we're going to host a workshop within the next couple of weeks for our teachers. And then we are actually, new staff will be joining us this summer. And so we have the opportunity to host a workshop again at the start of the school year for new teachers.
So 2 years, 3 years from now, we get a new Spanish teacher, we'll do another workshop?
Yes, so that actually happens all the time. As new teachers come on board, whether it's in Spanish or in any other curricular area, we provide professional development for teachers around the programs that we're using. And we have an extensive mentoring program in District 64. And so that also helps. So every new teacher has a mentor who supports them. And then our monthly curriculum meetings as well.
I just have one quick question. This is for a 6-year subscription. How long do we usually keep our subscriptions for Spanish or French or?
Typically 7 years.
Okay.
We've had this program for a lot longer, and then the pandemic kind of extended it.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, and Lori, so if we look at, and I don't know if you know exactly, but just kind of a roundabout. So if this includes the one year of the workbooks, like how much is that of the 96? You know, or,
Yeah,
or the
I can
whole
look that
cost?
up, but like a 5-year subscription to workbooks is probably about between $23,000 and $26,000. So workbooks are around $25 a piece.
Okay.
But when you buy them in a 10-pack or in a bundle, you can get them at a significant discount. This year's 7th grade class, has about 120 more students in it than our current 2nd grade class. So that's something else we'd like to do, is see that class graduate and then secure a subscription that would be more consistent for our student numbers. One thing that happens when you order the workbooks is they all come at once, and so you have to store them. So we also have to think about that as we're in transition with moving things around this summer.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I was just wondering like what additional cost that might have.
Mhm,
Okay, thank
mhm.
you. Anything else? Gareth?
Could you help me understand, relative to the current program, you know, the advantages of this program and the cost differential from the current program?
So our current, let's see. Yes, for Avancemos.
I could just touch upon it. Avancemos will be retiring. Actually, Avancemos, the book we have right now, the course we're using, will be retiring at the end of the year. So that is another big push to why we needed a new book as well. Plus, besides the fact that we were on year 7, or actually year 12 of Avancemos, but that's fine. We've been using it. It's been a fine core. It seemed worked in. And another nice aspect is that that Encuentros does move to the high school. So the students that go into level 2 will start with the level 2 Encuentros book. Does that make sense, or can I expand
that
a
does.
little bit more?
The high school, it's joined up so that
Yes.
people can transition smoother. But in terms of is the publisher different from that old
Yes,
program?
absolutely. Vista is different than Harcourt Mifflin, which is what we had for the previous textbook.
Okay. And is that publisher got a new curriculum or a new program? No. So this was
No.
basically not being supported
Right. We would
anymore.
have looked at theirs if they had one, but there was none.
So there's not really a cost differential. Okay, got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Anything else from the board? Any other questions? Okay. All right. Gracias.
Take a motion.
My one Spanish word. Okay. Yes, this is an action item, so let us, if anyone is ready to make the motion.
I move that.
Go ahead.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the adoption of Encuentros as recommended by District 64 World Language Team at the total cost of $91,930.66.
Second.
Okay, so Nikki had the motion, Phyllis had the second. Any more discussion from the board? All right, I think we are ready to vote.
Pearl?
Yes.
Whiteovich?
Yes.
Riles?
Yes.
Lubinsky, yes. Celis?
Yes.
Sotos?
Yes.
Kennedy?
Yes.
Motion carries. We have a new Spanish curriculum.
All right. All right, thank you, guys.
Hasta luego.
Anyone else want to jump in with the Spanish word? Okay. All right. All right, let's move on to our next item, probably our biggest item of the agenda. We are looking at the presentation of the special education audit. And Leanne and our consulting team are here. All right, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. I have with me Mr. Todd Zolik. He is the Chief Engagement Officer, I believe that is the title, for the Atlantic Research Partners, and he's going to present tonight the special education audit that we had approved back in November.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I appreciate the trust that you put in us to conduct this audit and do a review in your district. We appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this district, because that's really how we feel about these. We come and spend a lot of time not only reviewing documents, but spending time in your schools, spending time in your administrative offices, and really getting to know your teachers, your administrators, and some of your students as well. So it's really it's an honor for us to do that. So thank you for allowing us to do that. Before I get too far into our presentation tonight, I want to say a few things. I want to thank the folks who are here, not only you, the board, for approving us, but I also want to thank Dr. Olson and Dr. Frost for being a part of this throughout our process. They've been great partners in this work, and we really do appreciate everything that they've done to make this a very wonderful and seamless process for us. In addition to myself, I have two other colleagues who are not able to be here with us in person today. One of them is Bambi Lockman, and the other one is Tom McDowell. I believe that they are on their phone, so I think they can hear us, and they may be able to chime in, we believe, if needed. But for the most part, I'll be guiding us through this tonight, and they may be jumping in from time to time as needed. I believe that you all have had an opportunity to see the slides that I prepared for you tonight. I'm not going to go through every word on every slide. These are simply slides that are supposed to be an easy reference point for all of you, first of all, because it really consolidates our observations and our recommendations in one place for easy reference rather than thumbing through an entire report for that. But I will be going through and highlighting a number of items from there that I think the board will be interested in hearing sort of an overview of our observations and some of those recommendations. When we talk about conducting an audit, whatever that may be, but in this case we're specifically talking about special education, it's important to understand what that looks like and what that is. As you know, when we came into the district, we have a three-phase process in this work. The first one is our pre-work, where we get information from the district prior to being on site that we begin to review. Some of that we get from public information that we find from State Board of Education and so forth. Other documents are things that you all provide to us, that the district office and Dr. Frost and her team put together for us as well. And of course, as you know, the big part of this work is being on site in the school district. And that was where we had an opportunity to meet with administrators at the district office and had a chance to interact with the entire administrative team, not just special education, because they're all touching special education in one way or another, but then also being able to spend several days in each of your schools here in the district too, where we got to meet and interact with the administrators, of course all the teachers, where we went into classrooms, we did observations in the classrooms. We also had a chance to talk with teachers one-on-one. We held office hours multiple times in each of those buildings where teachers had the option, weren't required to, but they had the option to come and talk with us, share with us some of the great things that were happening from their perspective in special education and some of the challenges they were facing. In addition to that, we've done quite a bit of outreach with the PT3 group, which is a wonderful asset to your district here. and also did a parent meeting where we had an opportunity to remotely meet with parents via Zoom to have parent input in this entire process. And that was a wonderful opportunity as well. When we take a look at an audit, it is, of course, it is a snapshot in time. We were here for 3 weeks doing this type of work. We've looked at your documentation that's gone back over several years, looked at some of the plans moving forward, but again, it's important to remember that this is a snapshot in time. And when you think about that, you all are familiar with this too, because you've had this experience already once before back in 2018, when you had that audit there that brought to the forefront a number of items that needed to be addressed. And at the same time, you also had a new team coming in. You had a new student services director, relatively new superintendent coming in, and a lot of new faces taking a look at that and trying to address the needs that were in that audit. It's important to know that when you look at a change process, whether it's the audit in 2018 or whether it's the audit today that we're talking about in 2020, that change process typically takes 3 to 5 years to implement those changes. And I think it's really important that we review that 2018 audit, and I want to call out some of the great work that's been done on that, because there's been major progress that's been made from those recommendations in that 2018 audit, and that's work that you all should be proud of as a district and as a board and as an administrative team. There were great things that were done in that. There were some areas that certainly needed attention, and some of those areas got the full attention that it needed and are resolved. Others are still in progress. And when you look at our audit, I think it's important to recognize that this audit kind of picks up where the other one left off in a lot of ways, where we're saying, here are some great things that have happened, and here let's take another look at this and revisit and find out what things we still have to work on and go forward from here. So that's really a big part of what this audit is about, the notion that we're picking up where we have left off at that point, and now looking forward to the next 3 to 5 year change process. And you have a new director coming in. That's very exciting as well, where you're going to have some different ideas, some new ideas, and that's going to be a great opportunity for you too. But I want to commend Dr. Frost and her team and all of the administrators, Dr. Olson, for the work that they've done to do this. We don't oftentimes have an opportunity to see a district that has an audit so close to the one that we've done, the one that we're doing, and then see some of that progress that's made. So it's really exciting for us to be able to see that and to help celebrate some of that with you all, because I think it's something that needs to be commended. Okay. So first of all, I want to take a moment to, I want to take a moment just to thank a number of folks here. First of all the building administrators. Your building administrators are wonderful, welcoming, and were certainly helpful to us in the process that we went through. Your teachers and staff have been fantastic to work with and to deal with. We'll talk about them in a little bit, but we were very pleased to work with them. We really want to thank, as I mentioned earlier, the board for your commitment to this work and to being a part of this. I mentioned a little bit earlier, and I won't read through this, but sort of the purpose of our work and the 3 stages that we went into. This is we went through the process of reviewing data and information, of course doing staff interviews, classroom observations, and really looking at best practices in special education. When we do these types of audits, we look at them as a partnership. And we think that's important work because when we go in, looking at something in a vacuum can be difficult, but when we partner with folks, whether that's teachers in the classroom, whether that's administrative team, we come together and we start looking at things together. That's an important work. That also creates among teachers and staff members additional buy-in. So when we do come back with findings in a report, they understand that they had a voice in that. We think that's incredibly important in this work because their voices were heard. All of them that wanted to be heard had an opportunity to be heard. Some of them chose not to, and that's okay too. But we had a chance to do that. We also had a chance to bring parents into the picture and community members and others who wanted to participate, and we thought that we believe that's the best way to go about doing this type of work. I mentioned the methods of review as well. we focused here on 10 identified observations. And we're going to talk through those a little bit more detail here tonight. Again, I want to make sure that we're respectful of your time, so I'm not going to make a terribly lengthy presentation. I want to really have the time to open it up for you all for questions and comments and clarifications and so forth for this report. But I do want to touch on these observations that we have as well, and we'll get to those in just a moment. So I want to talk a little bit first about your district strengths. I think that you have a district, we've been able to, obviously this audit was focused on special education, but in the work that we do, we're inevitably in general education classes as well, whether that's co-teaching classes or push-in when we're observing a provider or what have you. We spend a lot of time in schools. We spend a lot of time walking around buildings and going into classrooms and so forth. I will tell you that you have a district that is excellent. You should be very proud of the work that you all are doing. You have opportunities for your students that many districts would completely envy. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful process that you all as a board have gone through to have some of those opportunities for your students. When you look at things like resources, just assistive technology resources, for example, you saw some of that earlier tonight. When you talk about technology resources that you have for not just special education students, but your general education students as well, some of the individuals and the specialists that you have in this district are excellent resources as well. So you're a resource-rich district, and that's fantastic because that provides many opportunities for your teachers, many opportunities for your team members and staff members to really be able to interact well with those students. One of the things that I think is most important to point out here is the exceptional personnel that you have in this district. As I mentioned earlier, you have teachers here who are really excellent. They do great work for their students. It's interesting, people always say to me, well, why would you comment on that? Aren't all teachers committed to their students? And quite sadly, I'll tell you no, it's not true. We go into a lot of buildings in a lot of districts where that's not necessarily the case. But when we walked into this building, these buildings, I should say, in this district, you can certainly see that the teachers you have in this district are committed to their kids. They have the big hearts, their hearts are in the right place, they're doing good work for students, and we think that's important to call out there as well. But your administrators are an excellent resource as well, both at the district level and at the building levels as well. As I mentioned, we had an opportunity to work with your administrative team at the district level. We met with all of your team members, your HR, your budget folks, Dr. Lopez, everyone at the district office, and they were not only helpful, but they were really a pleasure to work with. They're committed professionals, and I can see from the leadership team why the teachers are as dedicated as they are, having those leaders behind them. So we appreciate that as well. And I want to call out as well as specialists that you have. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. But I think that not all districts have these specialists that you have, and I think it's exciting that you have them, and I think it's wonderful. I know that that is a commitment that you have made as a district and as a board, but I want to call them out because you have folks like BCBA's, ABCBA, who is a wonderful resource, assistive technology folks, you have student services coordinators, intervention coaches, all of those pieces you have that are so important when you look at a special education program and a system. You really want those kind of pieces to it. You have those in place already. So when we look at an audit like this, what I don't want you to see is to take a look at these observations and recommendations and say, boy, there's so much to be done, or we're not doing well. That's not the intent behind this at all. What it is it's saying, we see all of these incredible pieces that you have, and now we wanted you to take those pieces and bring them together and really make a cohesive picture with that. That's the whole point behind this audit. That's what we want to assist the district in doing. So first of all, we're going to go through these observations, and I promise I won't read all the text on these slides. The first observation that we made was regarding special education continuum of services. The notion of a continuum of services is that we have a spectrum of needs of students and a spectrum of services that are offered in a school district in special education. One of the things that you do have in this district is again, pieces that go along with that. But one of the things that we recommend the district to develop is a framework for that, where we have a very clear framework of a continuum of services that is in place. And a framework that not only is in place, but one that teachers understand and can utilize and can work within. Because having something in place just for the sake of having it is not going to be effective. So we want to make sure that this is something that's utilized and it's easily understood and easily implemented in classrooms as well. We also talked a little bit about, as a part of that continuum of services, is a data piece. So making sure that we have data systems in place to measure what we're doing and to look at those transitions as we move throughout that continuum. And we also talk a little bit about training as a recommendation here. I want to pause for just a moment and talk about training in general. You'll hear me mention training in a number of components throughout this presentation. I want to let you know that your district does have training in place for your teachers. I'm not suggesting that you don't. You provide professional development, training. Sometimes that's internal providers, sometimes that's external providers. Those things are, those training opportunities are there for teachers. What we're suggesting in a number of these areas is that we augment that training. We make it a little bit more robust. We make sure that teachers are understanding that training and are implementing it in the classrooms. Because what we're finding in some cases is that the teachers may be going to training, may have an opportunity to go to training, but it may not be sinking in all the way to be implemented in the classroom. So that's what we want to make sure that when we talk about training, you understand that we're not suggesting there's no training happening. What we're suggesting is we want to take the training that's happening and make sure that it's then augmented and implemented in the classroom. Our second observation was to create a framework for consistently meeting student needs. And one of the things that we look at there is an instructional model. We proposed an instructional model for District 64, and it's nothing that is earth-shattering. It is something that is based on best practices, frankly. It's nothing that we developed that is outside the norm, but it is something that we recommend something like this, and it doesn't have to be this exact model, but we think that it's important, and I'll show you a graphic in just a moment that you've already seen in the report. We think that's an important piece for this. So developing that framework and making sure that our special education teachers and general education teachers understand that framework. So when we look at a continuum of services, and I'll just skip ahead here so you can see that visual. When you look at a continuum of services, we have this entire piece that goes, that is throughout the process. Even before we get to special education, we have MTSS, which is a three-tiered system of student supports that are in place pre-special education. We need to make sure our students are progressing through those tiers in a meaningful way before they even get referred to special education. So we want to make sure that framework is consistent and in place. The other area that we noticed is in that meeting student needs piece is looking at IEP eligibility. When we look at IEPs of students, and we reviewed a number of IEPs randomly selected, and talked in general with special education teachers about IEPs, we do notice that there are some students that have needs that have changed over time. And that's understandable, that's typical, that's not unusual at all. But one of the things we want to look at, and we mentioned this in a couple places in the report as well, that we don't want special education to be the end result for a student. We don't want that to be their stopping place. What we want to do is we want to make sure that students are receiving all of the supports that they need, whether that is in general education or in special education, and we have an opportunity then to have those students progress through that. As they are going through their IEPs and they are meeting some of the goals in their IEPs, we need to make sure that we are revising those goals, which we do on a regular basis, and that's happening in your IEP meetings. we want to make sure that we also understand that students may or may not always be in special education, right? This is not an end goal to be there, but in fact it is a place for students to receive the supports that they need. So students may in fact, over time, could work their way out of special education and back into a general education type setting where they may have some additional accommodations or may have some additional supports in place, but they wouldn't be necessarily in the special education program per se. And again, we mentioned a little bit about training for both special education teachers and general education teachers, because when we talk about a framework for this, it's important that we bring in our entire teaching force into that. It's not just about special education. It's not an us versus them. It's not, I have these students and you have those students. It is about all of our students coming together and making sure we're plugging them into the supports that they need along the way. We also observed an inclusion, talked about adopting an inclusion classroom and co-teaching as district standards. District 64 has an inclusion, desire for an inclusion model, and we believe that that is important. We believe we very, very much support that. We want to make sure, though, that we are in fact exercising that in a full way. We want to make sure that we are putting a full inclusion model in place. I think that we don't always understand exactly what that is as teachers when we have those opportunities. So we want to make sure, first of all, that we provide that joint professional development for general education teachers and special education teachers, again, in implementing inclusive classrooms and also implementing co-teaching. Right now we have co-teaching in the 4th through 8th grade, and one of our suggestions is to consider expanding that as well. And there's some reasons why we focused on the district focused on that 4th through 8th. But also looking at that and expanding that down into some of the earlier elementary grades as well. We also think that when we look at co-teaching, for example, we need common planning time for the teachers. For general education teachers and special education teachers to meet together and to do that co-planning piece is important. It's important for them to not only take the training together so that they're both on the same page in what they're going to be doing in the classroom, but also to have that common planning time to be able to put their lesson plans together to have a greater impact on students. And then, of course, as always, in schools and in districts, we want to make sure that we have a monitoring system in place to monitor if the co-teaching implemented in the classrooms is appropriate. I will tell you that you have great examples of co-teaching happening in many buildings throughout this district. We saw them firsthand. There's some excellent things that are happening in co-teaching here in the district. We believe that it could be expanded and augmented, but we also want to make sure that if we do that, and if you're going to expand your co-teaching model to additional classrooms or additional grades, that there is that monitoring piece in place to make sure that that's happening. We talked about also a multi-tiered system of support, MTSS. And as many of you know, I'm sure, that is a 3-tiered system. This is important to remember that MTSS is not special education. It happens before special education, is in the general education classrooms. But what we see in your district is a MTSS system that is in place. But it's not an MTSS system that is happening in every classroom in the district. In fully operational. So Tier 1, of course, is school-wide intervention, where we typically see about 80% of your students who are going to be in that Tier 1. There's students in our general education population that are receiving supports as part of their typical curriculum. Tier 2, we see those specialized interventions. And there we're giving a little bit more intense intervention, maybe some particular programs that we're having students utilize in the classroom to assist with that, and doing that in a meaningful way. We saw evidence of Tier 2 happening throughout the district. There are things that are happening in your classrooms. Tier 2 interventions are happening, but it is not universal. It is not happening in every classroom, and that's something that is very important as we think about that, as we look to developing a more robust MTSS system. Tier 3 is for that small percentage of students that really need the most intense interventions. And what we found in speaking with teachers and in our observations is that Tier 3 piece is a little bit tenuous in most places here in the district. Some teachers didn't really understand the difference between Tier 2 and Tier 3. Some thought that Tier 3 was the same as moving into special education, and that was sort of the planning process for it. So we really want to make sure that when we look at that, we have those individual and have those separated tiers and understand what that is and make sure that teachers understand all of that. Now, there are a lot of resources for teachers in MTSS that are out there. You have a website here in the district that Dr. Lopez and her team have developed, which is a great resource for your teachers. We've made some recommendations about the website in our report, but it is also something that I think we recommend that we really work on providing some training and professional development supports, particularly around Tier 2 and Tier 3 in MTSS, to make sure that teachers really understand what those are, the differences are, and how we progress from one tier to the next. And that's basically what's on there. I just set it all in a little quicker. Observation number 5 is to develop a district-wide data strategy. And I want to be clear when I say this as well, that your district uses data. I'm not suggesting that you don't. That happens every single day. It happens at the administrative level at your district offices. That happens in the building administrative level, and it happens in teachers in their classrooms every single day. But one of the things we want to do is we want to make sure that we have a standard. We have a process that's utilized throughout the district. We have policies in place for data on how to collect data, how to use data, and where to store data at the district level. Those policies aren't always put into practice in every single building and in every single classroom in the district. So what we would like to see is some additional training, some additional supports around the fact that we want to make sure that all teachers understand exactly what that data piece looks like, exactly what that policy is, and make sure that it's being implemented with fidelity in all of the classrooms throughout the district. And again, we talk a little bit about the professional development and training in how we go about doing that. Observation number 6 is where we talk a little bit about personnel. This is where we talk about our staffing needs of special education teachers, student services coordinators, school psychologists, and TAs. So when we look at special education teachers here in the district, one of the things we notice straight away is that there are a number of teachers who are a little bit frustrated. That's true in every district that we go into. We have some that are frustrated and so forth, and we start looking at why is that the case? Why are teachers sometimes frustrated and sometimes feel like they're burned out or something similar? One of the things that we look at there is a definition of workload versus caseload. So when we look at the caseload that most of your teachers have here in this district, it is very reasonable. It's a caseload that is comparable to other districts in the area, and it is not something that is exceedingly high or exceedingly low. It's pretty typical. But one of the things that we want to make sure that we're considering as a district is that caseload piece, but also the workload that goes along with that. We want to make sure that we recognize that there are some of those students who require a tremendous amount more attention and supports than students. We're not talking about just any kind of a widget here, right? We're talking about students who are all different, who have different needs and different, or find themselves in different places on the spectrum. So we want to make sure that we are recognizing that workload piece of the teachers as well. We also recommend for our special education teachers, we provide some suggestions for some topics, but provide additional professional development and training. Right now, there are a lot of training opportunities that are offered to teachers, sometimes outside of school hours, where they're compensated to come to those trainings, but looking at some of the training modules that are in place that Dr. Frost and others have put into place. They're excellent training programs, but not a lot of teachers are taking advantage of those because they are outside of school time. So one of our recommendations, and this is a big ask of you, but it is to really look at trying to carve out some additional time during school hours where we can provide that professional development for teachers and that training for teachers. And boy, that's easier said than done, I know. But that certainly is is something that we would certainly love to see if it's possible. When we talk about the TAs in your district, we want to make sure is, again, your TAs are provided with training and professional development opportunities, but many of them, again, are not taking advantage of that. We want to make sure that the supports that these TAs are receiving, the training that they're receiving is going to be beneficial to them in the classroom. We want to make sure that they are receiving that training as a mandatory piece of their job responsibilities, because right now there are a number of them that do not have the necessary training to complete their jobs in the way that they need to. We want to make sure that the roles of the TA in the district are really in alignment to support students' IEPs. We sometimes will see that is the case. Other times we see that TAs are not necessarily in alignment with those IEPs, and they may be doing other things, or you may find a situation where we have an IEP where a TA maybe no longer needed, and we need to make some adjustments to that IEP as well. When we talk about school psychologists, you have a number of very talented school psychologists here in your district. They do a lot of work, they do a lot of heavy lifting, not only as their role as a school psychologist, meeting with students and providing supports to students, both general education and special education who have needs, but they're also providing a lot of the pieces where we are evaluating students to see if they are eligible for special education. There's a lot on these folks' plates. Right now in the elementary schools, you are sharing school psychologists between a couple of buildings. And our recommendation is that, again, we would like to see a school psychologist in each building. And again, that is adding full-time employees to your district. However, we believe that is something that would be a benefit to the district. It would certainly be a benefit to the schools and to your students. That is, of course, an additional cost. And right now, I will also mention, as an aside, school psychologists are in high demand, and finding them is a little bit tough at the moment, but that is, again, a recommendation that we would make with our school psychologists. And finally, your student services coordinators. This is a role that I think the district has that is not in place in every district. I think it's great that you have it. You have some very talented people who serve in that role as student services coordinators, have a great relationship in the buildings. What we would like to see, again, your student services coordinators are spread very thin. You have them, again, shared in each of the buildings, which doesn't allow a lot of time for training, for one-on-one interaction with special education teachers. It's really more of kind of a touch point with teachers coming in and addressing big needs and so forth. So considering adding some student services coordinators into your team, I think would be a really beneficial opportunity for students and for your schools. Observation number 7, we talked about the behavior system in District 64. Behavior system in every district in America that we know of right now is certainly seeing an increase in behavior issues. We've been seeing it for the last several years. Your district is no exception to that rule. You're not out of the norm of what we're seeing in other places. One of the things that you do have is a CPI training here, where you have a team of people in each school who respond to significant behavior incidents. Now, we're not talking about little acting out in class here. We're talking about more significant, serious behavior issues, and I'm sure some of you already know about the CPI system. You have a lot of trained team members at each building. In fact, throughout your district, you have 117 trained CPI team members throughout the buildings, and that's a very impressive number. So the importance there is that we continue to provide those CPI members with the ongoing training and professional development that they need, and also begin to expand that to include others outside of just special education and related services, but also include some additional general education teachers in that training as well. One of the other pieces that you have here in your district is you have a BCBA. We have one person for the district, which is a wonderful asset that you have. We've watched her in action, and she's excellent, very, very professional, very highly regarded. I will tell you that if we could clone her or find additional BCBAs, I would certainly recommend that you do that. BCBAs are even harder to find than school psychologists right now, so it is a difficult task to do that, but you should know that you have a great one here in place already, and should you have an opportunity to bring in another one or more, that would certainly even be more wonderful for your district and for your students. The BCBA that you have in place now is someone who can provide additional training. She does provide a lot of training currently, and we would certainly encourage the district to utilize her, continue to provide that, that training, both the CPI training, which she does, and also additional behavior training for more general behavior issues among both special education and general education teachers. Observation number 8, we talked about to improving student services department rollout of initiatives, communication, and visibility. And I want to be clear on this. The Student Services Department here in your district is led by Dr. Frost and Angela, and they do an excellent job in your district. So I don't want to suggest that this is a slight on them or in any way, but what we want to talk a little bit about is sort of this notion of rolling out initiatives. And we talked about that in the report, where when we have some new areas of bringing something out, what teachers, I think, were wanted to hear more of is sort of the why and the how of what we're doing. Now, I know the district staff has thought through that. They, of course, have thought through that. That's how they came up with their plans. But sometimes that rollout to teachers is really important because they have that buy-in. They really want to know a little bit more deeper than what they might see in an email or in a process. So the student services team does a lot of initiatives, and with the teachers, they do a kickoff. My words, not theirs, but a kickoff meeting at the beginning of the year, and they do meetings throughout the year where they can have an opportunity to interact with teachers and special education teachers and other special education service providers to do that. And we really recommend that during that process we have those upfront and honest conversations with those teachers and really explain the why and the how of all of that. We also want to make sure that when we are talking about, we talked with teachers, one of the things that they were wanting to see more of was to develop that relationship with the Student Services Department. And a lot of that came with visibility in the schools and in the classrooms. The issue there is, of course, for the last couple of years, there's been a lot of restrictions on being in the buildings, even for your administrative team. And so as a result of that, we've not had that opportunity for the last couple of years like we would normally like to see. And so it's probably contributing to some of those teacher comments. But we want to really make sure that when we're carving out that time in a week, when we look at those schedules, that we have Student Services Department personnel, the leadership team there, really spending time in classrooms, not in an evaluative way, but really having an opportunity to see what's happening firsthand in those buildings and those classrooms. Really make sure that all the buildings and classrooms are being rotated. We also recommend that you take a look at the Medicaid reimbursement here in your district for your special needs students. You have a program in place now. You have some staff members at the district level who are doing a great job. They're collecting the data each month. They are compiling it, and they're sending it off to your processor, who is also doing a good job of that. We're not suggesting you need to make any changes in the process of what you're doing now. What we are suggesting is that to take a little closer look and do an evaluation of a few different things. We want to make sure that we're looking at service claims, administrative claims, and student transportation claims to make sure that we're capturing all of that. We did not do an in-depth analysis of that as part of this audit. That's really a separate process to go through for this. However, just looking at some of the data suggested to us that there may be some money being left on the table, and it's something that the district should consider looking at. And that's, again, something that's not the fault of the district administrative team. It's not the fault of the folks who are doing that processing. It simply is that when we need to continuously look at that year over year and make sure that we're not missing anything, and that hasn't been done for a couple of years, so we recommend that we do that. Observation number 9 was talking about parents and enhancing the partnership with parents with special needs students in District 64. One of the great things that we have is in this district is you have PT3, which is a great opportunity for parents to be involved. I sat through several of those meetings and was a part of several of those meetings over the last 3 or 4 months. 5 months, and really had a chance to interact with that group and observe that group. I think there's some great things that are happening. I think I really commend the district for allowing that to take place, because it is allowing parents to have a voice in the process of what's happening here in the district for their special needs students. One of our recommendations is to expand the PT3 to include additional parents and open that up to more individuals rather than having a small group, maybe expanding that group a bit to include more parents, so that more voices can be heard in that process. Because we know we have a lot of dedicated and committed parents in the special education program here. We also know that we have some parent education sessions. In fact, just tonight when I arrived, Dr. Frost was telling me about some of the parent session that occurred last night and some of the great opportunities that happened there. I think that is a very wonderful opportunity that the department does throughout the year and does engage parents. One of the things that we really want to encourage is that again, we draw more parents into this process. Some of these great programs that are in place are really only a handful of parents are attending. We really like to see more and more parents as a part of that. And I realize that that's not something that you as a board can legislate or direct, and certainly not something that the district administrators can direct. But we really want to encourage additional parents to be a part of those processes and those meetings and information sessions. Finally, our observation 10 is we wanted to talk a little bit about the specialized educational offerings in the district. You have some unique programs here in this district, which are exciting. One of them is the SLC at Washington, and that is a program that was put in place during the pandemic, which is a tough time to start anything. And you have a team of people there who have had some ups and downs due to some COVID-related issues and so forth, but they have been moving forward with that SLC program and doing a lot of work with that. One of the things we want to make sure is that rollout, again, just due to timing more than anything else, was a bit challenging with COVID. We want to make sure that as we're looking at that moving forward in a post-COVID era, hopefully that will be happening soon, is the notion that we want to make sure that we're continuing to provide the supports to the teachers and particularly the TAs in that SLC classroom that you have in place right now. The teacher you have there is very skilled, does a great job in the classroom, and has a lot of background and knowledge with students with autism. But not all of your TAs do in that classroom, and so we want to make sure that we're providing them with the adequate training to be able to address those needs as well. We've also, in the district, while we were in the district, I should say, did hear some discussion about the possibility of some additional specialized educational offerings, like potentially a second SLC going into place, or potentially expanding the SLC that's currently in place to provide opportunities for more students to participate in that. We certainly endorse all of that. We think that would be wonderful if that's something that the district decides to move forward with. We want to make sure, though, that before we expand too far into additional SLCs, but we make sure that the program in place currently is shored up and is operating to its fullest potential. We also heard the possibility, again, of a potential behavior unit, which would be something that would certainly be beneficial for the district. Again, that's something that would require a lot of planning and a lot of specialized team members if that's going to be in place. So we would encourage you, as you think through those, to be very deliberate in your planning around the staff members that we have in place there. And finally, we visited the preschool at Jefferson. And one of the areas there is, as you saw tonight, you have some really fantastic children in your preschool program, and I think it's really excellent that this district has a preschool program in place that is serving both general education students and special education students. We'd love to see a little bit of that program. It is a program that's in place now. We'd love to see that expanded. I know that, again, there's resources that would need to be expended to do that, but there are some good opportunities there to see that program expand and grow. But in addition to that, I think it's important that we really need to provide some of the oversight to our school building leadership at Jefferson and also to the teachers there. Sometimes when we have a program like a preschool, we're so focused on K-8 in districts that we sometimes kind of let the preschool program just operate and spin on its own. And we really want to make sure that as we're doing that we're very deliberate in our planning as a district for that preschool program to make sure that we are being clear with the administrators, being clear with the teachers what your expectations as a district and as a board are for them. And I don't think that that's always understood in this particular program among all of your teachers. We saw some teachers who were doing some great things in that building. We also saw some challenges there as well. And there's a few more details in the report on that, so I won't go too much further into that. I also have provided at the end my contact information for you as well, my email and direct line, that for you all, if you're anything like me, after the board meeting, you'll think of some questions. So feel free to utilize that as you will. If you need to shoot me an email or give me a phone call or text or whatever, happy to respond and chat with you more as well. But again, we really thank you for the opportunity to be a part of your district for a short period of time and to provide you with this audit report and a snapshot of where we are in the district for special education right now. It's really been an honor for us to be a part of it. So thank you very much for that. And I know I went just a little bit over my time I was supposed to, but I do want to make sure that we have enough time for questions for you all.
I'd like to go first.
Sure.
As you should.
I've been involved with special ed for a very long time.
Very good.
But you were talking about mandatory training for TAs, and we provide training for TAs.
You do, yes.
So if one of your recommendations, what are we going to, were you going to slam them on their performance appraisal if they don't go? I mean, what's your recommendation there?
No, I think one of the things that we're seeing that we observed, and again that we observed in with the training with TAs, is that much of the training for our TAs is outside of the regular school day period. So it's after school hours or during the summertime and so forth. And of course, you compensate those individuals when they come to that. The issue there is that many of them are not coming, and so we don't have a great turnouts for that. So one of our suggestions is that when we have those, when we have training opportunities, is to carve out time within the school day to do those trainings. Now that may be something that we're going to have to, be creative with that schedule and do that, and potentially even looking at potential substitute opportunities for those TAs and so forth. But really providing that during the school day where we have a chance for TAs to come to that training.
It's one of those things, and you said it pretty fast. It sounds good if you say it fast. But, our HR director's back there. Joel, we got any TAs and extra people standing around waiting to go to work?
You don't have too many extra people standing around, I don't think.
No, it's a difficult time to hire people.
Absolutely.
But I appreciate what you had to say. When you went into every one of the schools, did you do an exit briefing with the administration and their staff?
We did. We offered to do that at each of the schools. Ideally what we wanted to do, and sometimes it didn't work out exactly as planned, but our ideal situation was to meet with the administrative team when we arrived in the school, to have our initial meeting with them first, to sort of get their perspective and so forth on the school. And then do our observations, and then debrief with those administrative teams at the end of our time in the schools. That was the ideal. Sometimes we had, because of things that were going on in the building, we may not have been able to meet with them the first thing in the morning. We may have had to meet with them a little bit later in the morning. But we kind of
did do an exit briefing.
We did with the administrative teams, yes.
All right. You're talking about how did we choose the parents that you interviewed?
Sure. So what we did was we sent out, and I apologize, I didn't say this earlier. Not only did we interview parents, but we also provided all the parents with a survey as well that they could fill out. So what we did is we provided an invitation to all of the parents of special needs students to participate in the Zoom meeting that we had. And do you happen to remember? I don't remember off the top of my head. We had a pretty good turnout, I thought.
I only introduced Todd.
Again,
then I got off.
You were
so
there.
it was-
So I think that we've had we had some that came and went, but we had probably a good 50+ parents, I think, that were there during that period of
Do
time.
you know if we had some from every school?
I can't say for certain if we had some for every school. I have to go back and look, to be honest with you, but I believe that we had pretty good representation across the district. We did have very good representation as well from parents through the survey. And the reason we do both of those is we think that there are some parents who attended the parent meeting who don't feel comfortable speaking and don't want to share that. When they shared the survey with us, that came directly to us, to our company. It didn't go through the district or anything like that. So we made it very clear to them that it was anonymous. It wasn't something that was going to get back to anybody, in the building or so forth. So they were able to be a little bit more. Some felt more comfortable doing that than speaking at an open meeting.
In one of your conclusions, you asked about or recommended that we bring in an external partner annually.
So yes, so I know what you're talking about. One of the things, there are actually two places where we recommended that. One of them was to bring in an external partner to look at creating that framework that I mentioned earlier, so developing a special education framework for District 64. And the reason we recommend that is that we find that your administrative team and your at the district level and the building level are stretched pretty thin the way it is, and oftentimes adding that type of a process onto their plates can be really onerous. And so sometimes having a third party, an outside group come in and do that, and there are many great organizations that can and are able to do that out there. And that's usually not a multi-year thing. That's usually coming in and helping sort of get the ball rolling and kind of then letting the district work on that, maybe having some touch points from time to time after that. But again, that's a little bit different. Or I think you also mentioned the one thing that we did suggest is to have again an accountability partner for the district, and we suggested doing that on a quarterly basis for the first year after this is in place, just to make sure that when we're walking through some of these recommendations, looking at them to make sure that we are in fact looking at them with fidelity, making sure that we're doing them, and making sure that we're kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And so we do. That's something that's not unique to your district. When we go in, we recommend that to all of our districts, that they have someone come in and just sort of work alongside them for those periods of time. In your district, you're also going to be having some new folks in administrative roles in special education here who may or may not choose to need that or want that. So I think that's again something you'll want to think through with your director as well.
What do you think about, and this might be outside the audit, for some time I've been recommending that we have a gen ed, special ed film developed.
I'm sorry, a special ed
film.
Film?
Develop. I'm just curious, and I've been talking about this for years, where we actually take gen ed students and at the beginning of every year in every school, we teach them a little bit about our special ed students that are in the same school with them. I did that once before, and I was just, it seemed to work.
I think that that's a wonderful opportunity if we're able to do something like that. Whether that is through a film or through other types of media, there's lots of different opportunities to do that. One of the things that I think is interesting about your PT3 organization is that's something that they're doing right now, in fact, as well. Is they're looking at how we can introduce students with special needs or the areas of special need, maybe is a better way of saying that, to general education students and general education parents. And so I think that that's something that your PT3 group is doing right now, which is great as well.
I've always said I'm going to put that on my tombstone. Here lies the guy who recommended PT3 in District 64.
Well, I commend you for doing that.
If no one minds, I'd like to go second. I'm going to be a little less, I'm not going to pretend to know much about what you know.
Sure.
And what Dr. Frost knows. So I'm going to be a little more, I guess, forthcoming with my questions.
Sure, of course.
Are our kids getting what they need, and are they thriving?
Yes. Short answer to your question is yes. They are getting what they need. There are, as I mentioned at the outset, there are components to, there are all of the components that you need for a special education system are in place in this district. I think what the piece that we're trying to suggest in this report is that we need to pull them all together. We kind of have some things going on over here, a little bit more going on over here. We need a cohesive system that's bringing all of that together.
Are our teachers getting what they need?
I think that your teachers are getting a lot of opportunities. There is a lot of training. There is a lot of professional development. What I've noticed in speaking with a number of the teachers is that they may be attending trainings and attending professional development, but they may not always be fully understanding or implementing that training in the classroom. That's our observations based on the training agendas and so forth that we have taken a look at that's been provided by the district. We don't always see that in play in the classrooms, and I think that's why you'll see throughout the report that we recommend additional or augmenting the training that we're providing.
So is that because we're providing the wrong training, or is that because our teachers are not interested in our training?
Well, I guess that's a good question. I don't think that you're providing the wrong training at all. I think that there probably needs to be, when we look at those training needs of teachers, we know at the district level, we know that there's a vision for the special education program and the system that we have in place. So we want to make sure that from a district perspective, we're providing them all the training that they need there. But we also want to make sure that you have, as I mentioned earlier, you have a wealth of resources here in this district. There are a lot of programs, for example, that over the years have been purchased. Many of them are very, very good programs that can provide great supports to students. Not all teachers have received all the training on those programs. I'm not suggesting that you should be training every teacher on every program, because that's not financially feasible or time feasible. But I think we want to make sure that when we have programs, we have those teachers who are coming in, they really need to understand sort of our core programs that are available to them, not just what they are, but also how to utilize them in the classroom, how to implement them.
So in your opinion, from speaking to the teachers, are they, for the most part, because I know we can't be perfect, but are they, for the most part, satisfied with what this board and administration is providing them in tool-wise so that they can do their job?
Tool-wise, yes. I think you all should make sure that you understand this because that is something that we did not hear complaints about at all. The tools that they have, the programs that have been purchased, the curricula that's been purchased, all of those things, teachers did not complain about that at all. So from a tool perspective, I don't think there's any issue there at all. I think that maybe sometimes when we look at our teachers, what we're saying from a teacher perspective, and of course this isn't true across the board by any means, but when we have a teacher who maybe is not as experienced, we may say, okay, I know this program, so I'm going to make sure I steer all my children to this program, rather than saying, here are 5 kids and they have some different needs, and I need to find 4 or 5 different programs for these kids. One of the things, again, that's something we need to expand on some of those training opportunities so that we make sure teachers have a full understanding of what's out there and available to them in this district, because there are a lot of great things that are there.
From what you've heard, is this board providing administration and teachers with what they need for the program? Have there been any complaints that this board has not stepped up and provided what was needed?
I did not hear any of that, no. There was never from any of the folks that we talked to at any level, there were never a complaint about the board.
Are our kids getting the same help across the district between all our schools?
Well, the programs that you have and the pieces that you have in place are happening in all of the different buildings. One thing that we see is those are being done a little bit differently in each building, and we would expect to see that, right? There are different cultures in each building. We don't expect them to all be cookie cutters of one another, but there are certain themes we'd expect to see, and that's when we talk about that continuum of services and building that framework, creating a framework for the district. It should be a district framework and not a framework for one school or a framework for another school that might change when administrators change or might change when teams change within the building. So we want to make sure that we create that framework and provide that continuum throughout the district.
Are parents being heard and happy, for the most part, with the progress of their children? We haven't heard, I mean, there was a time when I was on this board where we heard loudly from parents, and I haven't heard from them lately. And I just want to make sure that not hearing from them is more so because they're happier with what we're doing and not so because they're exhausted with what we're not doing and they just gave up on us.
No, I understand, and I appreciate that question because that's important for a board to understand as well. I think that your parents, again, and I'm talking specifically about special education here, I think your parents in special education have a number of opportunities, maybe more than they've had in past years, to interact with folks at the district level. So we're providing them with opportunities like PT3, things like the parent sessions that you have again, my words, not yours, but parent university type of situations where parents can come in and learn aspects of special education. I think that there are more opportunities than there maybe had been in the past for parents. So from that perspective, I think they very much appreciate that. I also think that, whenever I talk to parents, it doesn't matter what school district and what part of the country we're in. We talk with special needs parents. There's always that desire. Parents are used to fighting for their kids, right? They're fighting for everything that those kids need because they've been doing it for the entire life of their child, right? And that's important. That's a great thing. We should be celebrating when parents are doing that. But I think that there's always, special ed parents in particular, they would always want more, right? They would always say, if we could have a little bit more, that would be great. So I don't know that I would say that as a district, I think you are providing excellent opportunities for parents to be a part of the conversations. I think that you are providing excellent resources for the parents. I think that you will find among special education parents that they would always take more if they could have it. But I would not complain about what is happening now.
Two more short
Sure,
ones.
absolutely.
Did you, in your process here, did you evaluate or somewhat evaluate our superintendent and his involvement in our SPED program?
I wouldn't say, I don't want to say that I evaluated Dr. Olson, but I will say that we did meet with Dr. Olson a number of times, a couple of times in person when we were here in the district, and I've met with him a few times over Zoom as well. I think that a few things of note for your superintendent. First of all, I think that he is well respected among staff and teachers and building administrators. We did hear that, as well as a lot of respect for your student services department as well. But I think that there is a good respect there for the superintendent. I also think that my observation is that Dr. Olson has provided the framework and the vision for the special education. He's entrusted Dr. Frost with that, and the two of them work very closely in tandem to make sure that that is being done and being implemented for students. So again, I don't want to sound like I'm blowing smoke, but I will say that I don't always see that in every district that we go into, and so I want to make sure that, to answer your question, I'm not uncomfortable with anything that's happening at the administrative level with your superintendent.
And finally, on a rudimentary level, and not holding you to this,
Sure, of course.
We had an audit.
Yes.
We have an audit. 1 through 5. Are we done? Meet everything 100%? We got no more work to do? I can pack up my bags and feel like I did my job and go home? Or are we still at 0?
No.
On a scale of 1 to 5.
Sure. I would say we're probably somewhere in that process, probably around a 3 at this point. And the reason I say that is because, again, as I mentioned, when we go through a change process like this in an audit, it takes 3 to 5 years to do that. And in that first audit that you had in 2018, there were a lot of big pieces that needed some big work. And so the fact that I would say that you maybe, if I had been here 4 years ago, I might have said you're at a 0. But at least based on that audit, I wasn't here 4 years ago, of course. But based on that, I'd say if that was 0, the fact that I'm evaluating and saying you're at a 3, you've done a huge amount of heavy lifting there. I really do believe that. To get from that 3 to a 5, where we can say we're doing well, some of the suggestions and the recommendations that we've put into place here, I think, are going to move you much further to that 5.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. I don't know if we're going around or not, but.
All right. Oh, can I ask a follow-up to one of Tom's questions? Okay, so, Tom had asked about the resources, and you indicated in your report that we are indeed resource-rich. Yet, is it implementation of the resources and services the issue, that we are over-inundating, over-inundating our staff with resources to the point where decisions on what to implement in the classroom, again, maybe we've overdone it in an aspect of, if there, like you said, there's a clearinghouse of resources, but simply providing the clearinghouse of resources doesn't directly tie into them, to their use in the classroom.
Right. So I would never say that you have overdone it in that regard, because when we think about special education, right, we can't always predict, of course, what we're going to see in these students that are coming into our district, right? So the fact that we have this huge array of resources is wonderful, because there may be a program that we don't use at all this year, but next year we're going to have a student who really needs that and who would really benefit from that. So I'm not never suggesting that we should be thinning things out or anything like that, but we really want to make sure that as those, when we do look at those resources, and the district has put together they've sort of started putting together a list of those resources, and has done that and provided that, and of course that's always changing and being updated because of what's happening in the new programs and so forth. But the issue there is that I think we want to make sure that we are approaching those resources appropriately. And here's what I mean by that. Again, we want to make sure that the program is being plugged into the child and not the child being plugged into a program. That's a real critical piece. And I think that we all know that, and I think that we understand that, but that can be really hard to do. And especially when you're a teacher and you have all of these kids that you're servicing, to be able to say, boy, if I can get these couple students in that program, that's going to be easier for me than if I have all of these different moving pieces. And that does happen sometimes, right? We know that happens in many districts. So we want to make sure that is that we're not taking a student and plugging them into the program, but really looking at this array of programs that you have, making sure that teachers have the knowledge and the resources to take those programs and to meet the needs of their child. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but that still leaves the gap of the teacher has to know when to implement a certain program.
That's correct. So a list in and of itself is good, right? Because we know what we have. It's sort of our inventory, our clearinghouse. But we also have to make sure as teachers that we know what we do with that, right? So if we said, if we have a particular program A and it does X, Y, and Z, well, I might conceptually have an idea of what that means. But what does that mean for a living, breathing student, right? What does that look like? So we may need to do a little bit more, professional development, maybe need to do a little more training in that. So maybe when we have a teacher who comes to the principal or to the district office and says, I've got this kid who has these issues and I'm not quite sure what I need to do with that, to sit down and to look at that with some of the folks that you have here, some of your specialists like your instructional coaches and your intervention specialist and so forth. And that's one of the great things you have in an intervention specialist here as well, someone who can literally sit down shoulder to shoulder with a teacher and say, okay, here are the needs of that student, here are the programs that we can put into place, and direct that teacher to the right place. But then we need to make sure they have the knowledge and the ability to use that program in an appropriate way with that student.
And then one last question, I'll cede it to my colleagues. I agree with the recommendation that we should have building-specific school psychologists. I think that should be done just across the board, and I would advocate for that on behalf of this board to strongly consider that be one of the first items that we kind of work towards based on these recommendations. But more broadly, in the discussion of caseload versus workload, simplistic question, how is our staffing meeting the needs? Do we need more staff?
I don't think that we necessarily need more staff. The places that we called out, we would recommend considering that, school psychologists being one example of that. For your special education staff, I think that we had an opportunity to meet with your HR director and really have some questions. I was very, very impressed, I have to say, with the metrics that he uses and his knowledge of that. That is not something we always see again in a HR director in a school district. And so I think that the HR director, along with Dr. Frost, really, they work in tandem very well to make sure that we have the staffing needs that we have in place. I think what we need to do, though, is if we're looking at that workload, maybe there are some adjustments that need to happen there within the staff that we have. Taking some of those students and moving them around among staff members might be the way to approach that rather than hiring more people for the sake of hiring. I don't advocate that at all, but doing that. Instead, really looking at how we're allocating that workload of students, if you will.
Thank you.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
So I keep hearing that we need framework, this framework that we're talking about, and who is supposed to be putting this framework together? Is it admin? Is it Lori? Who is supposed to be putting this framework together?
Sure. So when we talk about the notion of a framework for special education, in an ideal situation, it's a collaborative endeavor, right? It's something that is done at the administrative level, of course. And Dr. Frost has. I'm not suggesting there's nothing here, right? We're not suggesting there's just nothing in place. What we are suggesting is that there needs to be a little bit more kind of pulled together, if you will, into a true framework. So that would start at the administrative level of the district with the superintendent in collaboration with the student services director and really coming up with some of those points, because again, that goes back to what our goals are as a district for special education. Of course, our goals are to meet our students' needs and to be in compliance and all of that. We know those are the basic goals, but there also are some overarching goals as a district we want to move toward. And there are plans that are out there and policies, and you have a larger district plan and all of those kinds of things. So that framework needs to take all of that into account. And so that ideally would be started at the administrative level, at the district level, but then brought in other folks as well throughout your district. Building level admin, people like your student services coordinators, for example, who have that on the ground, boots on the ground knowledge. They're not truly administrators per se, but they really act in that fashion in a lot of ways, bringing them involved in that process. Also bringing folks like your special education teachers themselves, your related services personnel in there, and really helping to do that. That's one of the areas that we do recommend considering. If you're going to be going down that path, consider bringing in a third party to do that. As I mentioned, there are a lot of organizations out there that can assist a district with this type of thing. Again, not suggesting that you can't do it internally. It's just that sometimes that can be a really heavy lift for a district to do on their own. And sometimes if there are resources available for something like that, and I know that there oftentimes aren't, but if there are, we would suggest potentially bringing someone in to just kind of help guide that process.
Okay, and then you also, I heard you say something about the inclusion classrooms. And I know Jefferson's like an inclusion program. So what does like a regular inclusion program or classroom look like in a regular, not at Jefferson? Because that's for like the younger kids.
In other
Yeah, in other buildings.
Other
What does
buildings?
it look like?
Well, it's a little, I almost refer to you on this one, but it's a little bit different in different places in your district. And so we have in some buildings, we have co-teaching models that are in place. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we have sort of the whole spectrum of co-teaching. We have some excellent examples that you could really their textbook. You could put them put them on a video and show it to folks as this is what it is, the definition. And then we have other places where people maybe don't have that knowledge or training that they need. They're trying. It's not that they're not trying to do that, but they just don't really understand what that co-teaching piece is, or they haven't been able to work together. So it's more like having a teacher and sort of an assistant in the classroom, and that's really not a true co-teaching model. When we look at those types of things, so some classrooms have things like co-teaching in them. Other classrooms, we don't see that, but we really want to bring those students in. So, for example, in our here in the district, in the K-3 buildings, we're not currently utilizing co-teaching. And that's a district decision, and I don't disagree with that. We want to make sure that at that level we're doing that. And there's some very specific reasons that the district has chosen to do that, and I respect that. But then at the inclusion at the lower grades, we look at other things. We look at bringing students in. We want to have those special needs students in the classroom as much as possible with their general education peers. That's the whole concept of inclusion, right? So instead of we know that there are times we're going to have to pull a student out for something, maybe to meet with an OT or a PT. Ideally, we'd have that OT come into the classroom and be a part of that. So the student's not being pulled out necessarily, but maybe the OT is pushing in. Or instead of maybe having, and again, this doesn't necessarily happen here across the board, but if you have a student who is missing PE every day to go to the SLP, for example, well, that's really not being a part of that class because you're missing a big component of that. Or sometimes what we see in districts is we have students missing all of their specials. We didn't see that here as much, but missing all of their specials. And that can be disruptive too, because that's really not inclusion. Now we're taking a kid out. Now all the other students in that room are saying, okay, that child is different because he's going somewhere else during this time. So the concept of an inclusion model is just having as many students as possible.
So we need more inclusion is what you're thinking,
I think that the district does a very good job of we're working toward inclusion and are doing a really good job and have a lot of components of that in place. I would like to see and I would like to encourage you to consider even more inclusion in the classrooms.
Got it. And then my last question, I think, you said that teachers didn't always understand the tier 2 and tier 3.
Yes.
And how do we make them understand that? Like what can we do as a board or as administrators to make them understand and get the resources out of what the training?
Sure. Well, that's a really good question. And Dr. Lopez and I have had a number of conversations about this. The issue there is that there is training happening. Teachers are receiving training on the MTSS. There, tier 1 in your district, there's no issue with tier 1. That's something that's happening, and no issues there. Tier 2, what we're seeing is I don't think that all teachers have a full understanding of what MTSS is. It's almost like in some ways I feel like we have to go back to the basics.
And is it the younger teachers?
Pardon me?
Is it the younger teachers who don't always understand?
Not necessarily. Okay. Not necessarily. In fact, many of our younger teachers, when they were going through their teacher education programs, had a lot of focus on MTSS because that is something that's in place. Oftentimes we see our more veteran teachers. This is something that hasn't been I shouldn't say that. The concept has been around for a long time. The MTSS per se that we currently utilize has not been is a newer phenomenon, I guess, at least in the way we look at it now. And so I think that we find that we oftentimes revert back to sort of the way things used to be done when we look at that, rather than looking at tier 2 and saying, okay, what specific interventions are we going to do for this student, right? What are we going to do for this student? How are we going to measure them, and how are we going to put them in place? So sometimes we'll find as teachers don't necessarily know what that looks like they might have in their head, even through training, they may say, okay, tier 2, I know I have to provide interventions to students, I know I have to provide additional supports. and they go about doing that in maybe not a way that is entirely best practice or entirely the way we want to see that happen. The thing that did strike us probably the most was the Tier 3 piece here in the district, because that's something that we asked a lot of teachers about, and there were a surprising number of teachers who really didn't have a concept of the difference between Tier 2 and Tier 3. Tier 3 is more intense or different interventions for those students. And when we had teachers who would come to us and say, some new, some experienced, say, talk to us about Tier 3. They say, well, Tier 3 is special education, and it's not. And so we heard that a lot from teachers. And when you hear that from one teacher or two teachers, maybe that's sort of a footnote that we would say in a report or something we might mention to a director. But when we hear that from a lot of teachers, we start saying, okay, something's not clicking here. So we're not suggesting that the training's not happening. Somehow the training's not being implemented, I think, is the issue there.
Okay.
Is it okay if I just ask a quick follow-up on that, because I think that's an important point? Like,
sure.
So what's your sample there to make that conclusion? What data? You said you surveyed or you talked to a lot of teachers.
Yeah, so
I didn't get a hard figure there, so I'm trying to get a sense of.
I don't have a hard figure to give you on that, but when we met with teachers in your buildings, we visited each of your buildings and met with teachers, both general ed and special education teachers. The focus was on having special education teachers come into our office hours, but we also met with a lot of general education teachers as well who came in to meet with us as well. And we heard that Tier 3 issue both from general ed teachers and from special education teachers, and that was something we heard in buildings throughout the district.
So not just anecdotal, it's...
Oh, no, we talked about, when we met with groups of teachers, we talked about MTSS and talked about what that was. And there were groups of teachers who were very knowledgeable about MTSS. They could talk with us about those things. They could talk with us about tiers. They could talk to us about interventions and so forth. But there were many teachers that we met with that just didn't have that
But
concept.
you didn't collect the data and have a kind of a 50% of teachers that you met with?
No, I didn't collect a hard number of how many teachers. I didn't count heads.
So it's just a anecdotal comment then without hard data? It
is again based on our observation and the methodology that we use to do the study.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
More Tier 3 knowledge in middle schools or K through 5?
That's a good question. I would say that there was probably more Tier 3 knowledge in middle schools than in elementary schools in this district that we saw. Both of your middle school buildings have some of the folks we met with are really very, very good, very talented folks who really understood what we were talking about.
Okay, and then my one last question, when you were in the meetings with the PT3 or in the schools, what were the comments or conversations about parents-teacher relationships with the special ed? Did they feel open and like they could go and talk to them? Did they feel not heard? What was your sense?
Yeah, so my sense was, I think that, to be honest with you, it was a bit of a mixed bag when we talked to folks. There were a lot of parents that we talked with, both in the parent meeting and in PT3, and then also read in the comments that we got in the surveys that there was good communication. And I think that some parents had developed a relationship, whether that was by the parent kind of pushing for that relationship or whether that was the teacher. I'm not quite sure where that was, but a lot of them had that relationship where they did have almost like a dialogue going on with the teacher, maybe not, certainly not every day, but on a more regular basis where that was happening. We did have comments from parents about the lack of communication and that it was hard to get a hold of teachers and so forth. And I understand that from a parent. One of the things I did mention to, I believe this was, I don't think I said this in PT3, I think it was during our parents meeting. I do sort of try to explain to parents as well that you have to have some realistic expectations when you talk about communication as well. Daily communication for some students is important, and that needs to happen, but not for all of our special education students. Maybe developing that rhythm where we're having a weekly check-in with the parents, or maybe every other day sending an email and having a phone call at the end of the week. Something like that works both for the parents and for the teacher, because these teachers they have a lot on their plate, and it's hard to complete all of that during the school day as well. So to answer your question, I would say it was some parents thought the communication was great, others thought it was challenging.
And then one last thing, and then I'll be done. The teachers, I thought I heard you say the teachers' assistants were not taking full advantage of the training or not in alignment with the IEP training. And how can we fix that? Because if we have all the training and we have the resources.
Yeah, so the challenge there, and as your colleague mentioned as well, a lot of the TA training is happening outside of school hours, where we're asking people to come in on weekends, evenings, so forth, whenever during the summer, and we're not seeing the participation that we'd like to see for the TAs in particular. What TAs are really important components in special education. For some students, because they're required on their IEPs. But beyond that, TAs are really important pieces to this whole thing, but we oftentimes know that our TAs don't necessarily have a special education degree per se. They may have an education degree, they may not have an education degree at all. They may be doing this from a different background. So really providing that training for those individuals to make sure that they are understanding what their role is and how to do that and how to even interact with students. Because sometimes we go into classrooms, you can see TAs wanting to be helpful, but they're not doing exactly what needs to be done, right? There's this instinct to help, but there's not necessarily the knowledge or the experience to be able to know what that looks like. And again, that goes back to that notion of these aren't people who are sitting around, wondering what they're going to do for the day. They're busy during the day. They're moving around with students. They're moving from classroom to classroom and so forth. So I know that it's easier said than done to provide training for them during the school day. However, I think that's really important, because when we do have this notion of someone in that classroom assisting those students, they need to have that knowledge and ability to be able to do it in a meaningful way and really help that student, but also to augment what the teacher is doing.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, thanks for
Hi there.
coming. Todd. I actually attended that parent meeting, so.
I remember that, yes.
I've been a parent since before Leanne was here, so thanks for, recognizing the great strides we've made over the past, several years.
Absolutely.
That is the case, and, we're going to start new soon with someone else. So you did mention the accountability partner, and you said you would refers to third-party other organizations. Would there, at your company, is there the capacity for that? Are you doing that for any other district? So would you be able to do that if we needed you?
The short answer to your question is yes. We are able to do it, and we do this in other places as well. I don't ever want to come across as trying to suggest that we're looking for the next contract with a district, so I always suggest that there are other organizations out there that do that. There are some advantages to having an organization that has been in the district and has a good feel for the district. There's also an advantage to having someone with a fresh set of eyes coming in. So that's something that the administrative team and the board would need to look at and see if, kind of where you would, if you choose to do that, what kind of opportunity you'd like to do. But yes, we do have the capacity to do that.
Okay, and then you mentioned that you did, you answered Larry's question about debriefing the admin teams at the schools afterwards.
Yes.
But then you also mentioned that the admin teams at the building level are stretched pretty thin. So right now we are going through a change. We're going to have Dr. Frost's replacement soon.
Yes.
So how would your findings at the building level be communicated to the admin teams
at the buildings?
Right. Yeah, basically. So how would we go from the debriefing sessions to, let's say, next school year?
Sure. So one of the things that we really did in our debriefs with each of those building leaders is we just obviously talked specifically about their building and sort of some of the things that we observed, some of the things that we saw, some of the conversations that we had, again, not tying it back to particular teachers, but in the broad perspectives. When we talk about this report and how we utilize that at a building by building level, I think, again, that goes back to the notion of the administrative team and the new director who's going to be coming in and her team taking that information and disseminating it out. First of all, coming up with a plan. As a component of this, we have a suggested timelines that we propose. That may not work for your district. You may come up with different timelines as a board. You may take some of those recommendations out. All of that is okay, but we need to come up with that sort of our plan of attack, if you will, and how we're going to address some of these areas and items. And then what we need to make sure is that's communicated out. So really, that needs to happen, in my opinion, from the administrative team out to the building leaders. Now, one of the great resources you have here as well is the student services coordinators who can help carry that water, so to speak, right? They can be a part of that as well, and as they go into these buildings, they can make sure that they're reinforcing what's coming from district office into the buildings so that not only is the building leadership understanding that, but also the teachers in the classroom are understanding what's happening and how that's being implemented.
So is that information at the building level, is that all oral, or is there something else that they would be communicating?
Well, again, I think that it's probably oral in some ways, right? Because there needs to be a discussion on what's going to happen and how that gets rolled out. And that's what we were talking about in the report of sort of at the beginning of the school year, setting that tone for the year and making sure that we're rolling out our ideas for the special education department, or student services department, I should say, and making sure that everyone understands that. But I also think that there needs to be some plans in place. So it can't just be verbal. I think there needs to be some concrete plans in place, and however you do that, whether it's charts or graphs or timelines or what have you, sort of indicating what's going to be happening where along those lines, so people have that understanding of the changes that are not only going to be happening on the short term, but also kind of see that long horizon, if you will, of changes that are coming down maybe next year or down the road. And some of those items might be a work in progress over a number of years. Some of them might be something that can happen very quickly. So again, I think that it's a combination of both oral presentation to folks, laying that vision out at the beginning of the school year, but then also following that up with a lot of supports and a lot of written material as well.
I think my question was your findings at the building level being communicated to
Oh,
the
I'm
team
sorry.
going forward.
I'm sorry. I misunderstood that.
Probably wasn't clear.
No, that's okay. So our findings for at the building level, yes, were orally communicated. When we talk about the findings at our buildings, much of, obviously, all of this report is based on the findings that we saw across the board in the schools. There are a few buildings, a few things that stood out to us. For example, we called out Jefferson specifically because of the preschool program. We called out Washington specifically because of the SLC. But again, these are general comments. We didn't go into any of your buildings in your district and go, wow, this one is terrible. There's awful things happening here. What we saw was good things happening in all of your buildings. What we want to see is we saw a lot of the same trends happening in all those buildings as well, things where we had components, but we didn't have a full picture. And so going back to those buildings and sharing with them our recommendations from this overall report is very similar to the debriefings that we had in the buildings as well, because it's really going to, again, be something that needs to happen district-wide as a district-wide policy and not something that is happening in building A but not building B.
Right, I think I'm just concerned because you did do all this work. It was a whole 3-week thing. And I believe that originally you were going, or in response to the RFP, you were going to do, right, the building-specific reports or 9 reports,
Mm-hmm.
but then that changed along the way.
So that is, as we indicated during the interview process with the RFP and everything, that we said that that's something that we're able to do and we're willing to do as a piece to our work in the buildings. We offer to do the building report for each building. I would say about half of the districts we work with take us up on that, and about half of them don't. And that is, again, something that is a district-by-district decision. Our building reports in this district, I can tell you, would be very closely mirrored to what you see in our final report. Again, because we don't have dramatic differences other than a handful of things in certain buildings that are program-specific. We don't see one building wildly out of alignment with another building. What we see is we want to make sure that they're all coming together. So you're correct that we did offer that. The district declined to do the building by building reports, and that's okay. So I will tell you that the report that we have, the final report for this, is reflective of all of the buildings and can be utilized in any one of those buildings because we see the same trends in each.
Do you remember when the district declined the building-specific reports? I mean, not, you know, the date, obviously.
I don't remember the
but
date, no.
We're in the process. Because did you ever have a signed version of the contract? Because we've seen the unsigned versions, and then when we...
I believe we have a signed copy of the contract,
right.
and I can certainly provide it to you.
That was just my concern, because the contract said that you're going to provide all the services and, you know, the response to the RFP, plus, you know, X and Y, all the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the response to RFP, it was very specific that in phase 2, we're going to have, 9 sites. You know, I'm not calling you out, and clearly you were told something, you know, so I'm just trying to figure out what happened between the time we saw the contract and then just basically what changed. Like, were there any written changes to the contract?
There were no written changes to the contract.
So then the version we have would have been the one that was the agreement?
The contract that you all voted on as a board, and that the district signed, and that we signed is the contract. There's been no whiteout was applied.
The discussions about not doing the site-specific reports, did that happen before you signed the contract?
No, it did not.
Okay.
We always offered to do this for districts. Not all districts take us up on it, and that's okay. There's not an issue with that. What we do with that is we want to make sure that we offer that, again, as an option. And the reason we started putting that in our proposals is because I had districts, we didn't initially do that, or didn't initially put that out there, and we had districts who would come to us and say, can you do this for us? Can you do this for us? And I started putting it in there as an option. Any component of that agreement that we had could have been changed by the board or by the administration at any time. I mean, if you came to us and said, we don't want you to do X or we don't want you to do Y, we're going to comply with what you request. I mean, we're working for you at that point.
Right. So do you know what else was changed in the contract?
As far as I know, nothing.
That was the only thing?
I believe so.
Okay. And so you said it was a component. I noticed it was, 27,000 something allocated for the site-specific reports and our final reports?
I'd have to look back at the contract. I'm sorry, I didn't bring that with me.
Okay, so...
I can tell you that, I will tell you, if you're talking about it from a financial perspective on those site-specific reports, if you're asking what the component is for those, I will tell you that it's the very simple answer to that. There is no additional cost for those reports, those site-specific reports. So what we do with that is we would go through the same process that we do, just like in any other scenario. We would visit every school building and do that type of thing. The reason we put that in there for the site-specific reports is that is something that I do, quite frankly, on my own time. I do it outside of my regular working hours, and I do it for districts, that want those building-specific reports. So there's no cost component in that. The reason I've been doing that is because some places have requested that for a variety of different reasons, and so I've decided to offer it. I don't mind doing it. It's not a huge amount of work for me because the site-specific reports are not what you see here. It's not a 46 or 48-page report. It is literally, it is a PowerPoint presentation with bullet points that we have. So it's a handful of pages. It doesn't take me a huge amount of time to do it, and quite honestly, in most districts, many of them mirror what's in the final report anyway, with some exceptions that have outlier buildings or that kind of thing, which you don't have in this district.
Right. I mean, it might be helpful. So, because we did see the mentions of the issues specifically at Washington and Jefferson, Washington with the SLC and Jefferson with its own, set of issues. So do you think you have enough information to do the site-specific reports? I'm not trying to create extra work for you, but since you did say there's no additional cost to the district, do you, without, having to go back and, do any interviews, do you think you have enough information?
Absolutely.
I
would go through no different process than we did, whether I was doing site-specific reports or not. This, our interviewing the people that we did, looking at the data and so forth would be the same process. And you would, frankly, you will get the same, in this district, in your example, you will get the same information in your site-specific reports that you're going to find in here.
Okay.
It sounds like what I'm hearing is that the work that you use to create the site-specific reports is done either way, whether you create them or not.
That's correct.
You do the analysis of the district, and then from whatever you gathered, you either give a district a site-specific report or you don't. You don't do anything additional for that component. It's all garnered from the work that was already put in.
Possibly, but I did see the one
You're
difference,
exactly right.
though. One difference could be because if you, in the original response to the RFP, there was contemplated parent groups that were building specific. So that didn't necessarily happen here, because you weren't going to do the site-specific reports. So that might have been
No, that's not the
different.
case at all. The reason that we did not do the building-specific parent was actually a product of the times.
Okay.
Because we had we were not going to be having parent in-person meetings, and we were going to be doing it via Zoom. And as a result of that, any parent could attend that meeting that they wanted to, that we didn't have to do it neighborhood by neighborhood or area by area. That's the reason we do that.
So
Because
instead
we were
you did go to the PT3, so that, could be comparable because,
But
you're
we
talking about-
invited all
Right,
parents of
yeah.
all special education students to come to that Zoom meeting, and that's all parents have an opportunity for access to that. The reason we would ever do building-specific parent meetings is maybe parents don't have the resources to be able to get to one big meeting at the central office. So having something that's closer to their homes or in their neighborhood is maybe easier for them to get to. In this case, because we were having a scenario where we were doing all of this by Zoom because of the COVID issues and so forth, that's not access isn't an issue.
Right.
So
And
now
Larry
we can
asked
do one full
before
meeting.
if parents from all the schools attended. I believe they did.
I believe so, but I
Right,
can't
right.
say that for certain. I'd have to go back and look at my notes, and I don't have that with
Well,
me.
yeah, and I was careful not to take, because parents were talking about serious issues and things like that, so I wasn't going to take extensive notes.
We did ask parents in that, and you might remember, to not only to give their name, but also to say what school their child was in. So we did ask them to say that.
So in your report, I think one really interesting thing, and I don't want to beat a dead horse because you've talked a lot about MTSS, but I think like that addresses a lot of these overarching issues, and if we not fix that, but if we try to improve that, then I think that would fill in a lot of gaps in it, including a lot of I wouldn't say disgruntled parents, but a lot of people who are unhappy because they think it's an IEP or nothing. But I think as a district, we need to fill in that gap, and as you said, based on data, so that parents know that something is happening and they don't think their kid is just floundering.
Right, absolutely. And that goes back to our first observation there, is that continuum of services, because that's looking across the board, across the district, looking at that, again, that framework that we put into place starts, remember, with the district, not special education, but talks about general education, and looking at those tiered processes, then deciding if a student's data is demonstrating that that student needs additional services in special education. So I think you're exactly right. And I want to be careful that we say, we're not saying that we have to necessarily fix MTSS, but what we really want to do is to make sure that we are meeting all of those tiers and providing the services or the programs or the assistance in each of those tiers across the board, and doing it uniformly across the district. So I think that you are absolutely right. Looking at that continuum of services and making sure that we're meeting all of those points along the continuum is an important way to look at it.
So I noticed that observation 4 about MTSS, that was in like the second tranche of recommendations time-wise, but did you expect certain things to be started sooner because they'll just take longer? Because you have the end date. So did you expect that to be, the district to start on that later? Or is the end date not indicative of the start date?
That's a really good question. It's actually something that, as you're saying that, I probably should be a little bit more specific when we write these next time about a start date as well. But the reality with that is, I think that, again, the reason that's pushed out a little bit is because I think that's something that's going to take a little bit more time to address all of those needs. Not suggesting that we should be starting later, but something that we should be looking at now, but it's going to take a little bit more time to do that and to put that in place. Some of these recommendations, there are a few of them that we put in there that are areas that can be addressed pretty quickly, and I think that this is one that's going to be a little bit longer process. Now, keep in mind that an important piece to all of this is these are our recommendations. The reality is that your district may be different than our recommendations for that timeline. The other thing that we were sensitive about in putting that together is you have a new director coming in. And to say that something needs to be accomplished by, September 1st, when we have a start date of July 1st, is not realistic. Your new director is going to be needing to understand what's going on, going to be needing to understand the district and learn the district, not just what's in this report, but just in general. So we want to make sure that we're trying to be as realistic as possible about that as well. And remember that those dates can always be adjusted, either earlier or later, as you may, as may be needed. So I would say that you need to really be in tune with your special education director, your student services director rather, and really kind of feeling out what that looks like as far as a timeline goes.
Okay, Gareth, did you have any further questions right now?
No, I'm a little interested in if the site-specific reports are not that difficult to produce, like how quickly could you give them to the board, like in the next month?
If the board and if the district asked me to do that, I would say within the next month. I mean, it's going to be very similar to what you're seeing already, but I could certainly put that together for you.
Okay. And it's kind of, maybe I'm jumping over here a little bit.
I have a data question. Well, I guess that kind of goes along with that, though, too.
Sorry, I'll wait.
Oh, okay. You had mentioned, that there were surveys, at least specifically deployed to parents, and then was there also a survey deployed to teachers?
Yes, and I apologize if I didn't mention that. You are correct.
So is there any way we could get the results of the surveys as an appendix to this report?
I don't know. I probably. I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed to doing that. That's not something we usually do, but if we clean that up to make sure that there were no names associated with that and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, if de-identified data is possible,
the names we could take off. I can put something together like that. I mean, just so you understand what they are, is they're basically. They're really not all that fancy. They're the Google forms that we have them fill out, and so it comes back to us in like an Excel spreadsheet kind of thing. I'm just thinking for presentation purposes what that might look like, but we can probably put something together that makes that look a little bit more.
I think it just would maybe be helpful for the administration to have that data on hand, and specifically, I don't know what survey questions were asked, but if there were, for example, free response questions asked to parents where they were able to provide feedback. That may be helpful, along with any, feedback provided by the teacher specifically through those surveys. As you mentioned, some parents may not have felt comfortable sharing at a Zoom meeting, but that the survey might be an alternative way to get their feedback, and I think that information would be helpful if we're able to get that as an appendix to the report.
If the district wants to have us do that, we can certainly do that. That's not difficult to do. It'll just take me a little time to clean that up and make it in a presentable fashion.
And I guess
easy
just
to
kind
read.
of thinking, it's more of a it's not a question, more of a comment, that looking at the engagement levels of how many people ended up filling out that comment, does this only represent a subset of the parents who are directly impacted by the special education audit? Do we need to do more broader community assessments of the parents and families involved? This may have captured all of that, but just something to kind of be thinking about moving forward.
I think that it's important, just my opinion for what it's worth on this, that if you do decide that you want that information, I think it's important that you message out to your teachers and your parents that this is information that is not tied back to anyone in particular. I know that a lot of folks are very nervous about that, and so we want to make sure that that's something that is communicated out so the parents don't feel betrayed by that process, if you will.
I just wanted to comment. I hope the board understands you're giving several suggestions, or you're asking questions. If we did this, how would this go? But I think tonight's about understanding the audit. There was never an intent to do individual reports. If that's the direction the board wants to go, we need to have some significant conversations so the board understands the pros and cons of that. Like, for instance, we have a major trust issue in this district. And now that we're going to give the board surveys that teachers thought they were filling out without the board seeing them at the end creates certain problems. So I'm okay with everybody asking and, of these ideas and stuff, but I think for us to then go do something, we're going to need to talk about it and make decisions on what to do with that.
Did you just say that the site-specific reports were never contemplated?
They were never intended.
The survey. Okay, sorry.
No, I said site.
Right.
No, Carol's right.
The surveys you're talking about, right? Not the site-specific reports.
Maybe, are we mixing two topics up at the same time?
You're just talking about the surveys, right?
No, I'm talking about everything.
Everything?
Okay.
I just want to point out that that was a component of the written contract. That's all.
And the RFP, though, as
Yes.
well. So.
And as he has explained, he puts in the choices of what the board wants to do. I do not recall there was ever a sentence or a conversation about wanting to come up with something new. My understanding was this was to evaluate where the district was in 2018 to where they are now, and to be able to compare what have we done well and what areas do we still need to proceed. Again, I apologize if there was a misunderstanding that was automatically going to happen. Obviously, as Todd shared, there are ways that we can do it. Again, I would please ask the board if we could talk about it before we just make decisions.
Right, I'm just going to point out that on page 4 of the contract, like I said, we have the unsigned version, but Todd mentioned that this was the version and there were no written revisions. So page 4 does say ARP will provide all services outlined in the RFP and response to RFP. And then so the response is very specific about these site-specific reports. And I don't want to sound like I'm obsessed with them, or that I'm sandbagging Eric or anything, but I'm just saying when you say never, it's, just contradicted by the written agreement. And then also, let's see.
But that's an option
Right.
that was provided in that written agreement. So
If you say it's an option, but then I'm just saying that the sentence says will provide, and it's fine. And I'm very glad that you mentioned that there's no additional cost, because that makes, I think, a lot of us feel a lot better, and that you don't have to do any more work, to the extent that we have those conversations that Eric just mentioned. So the other thing that I want to point out is that paragraph 13B of the agreement says that it may not be modified or amended except in writing executed by the parties here too, and this is the version that we are saying is signed. So that's all, and I don't want, it's not like it's some gotcha moment or anything like that, and I'm not, trying to chastise anyone. It's just, where are we and what, and I just think it's important going forward because of various issues, one, it was just Washington and Jefferson that were specifically mentioned when you did do all the work of visiting all of the buildings. And then, Larry mentioned with, MTSS, are there specific issues, in the middle school as opposed to, so all of these little issues, it's fine if it's just, 3-page PowerPoint. That would be great, especially, like I said, because Dr. Frost is leaving. So that's all, and I'm not,
I think it's important.
crying about it or anything.
I want to make sure, though, that I want to reiterate what Dr. Olson just said, though. I think that when we go in and do these types of things, there is a high level of trust issues, right? Your district does have a lot of trust issues among teachers and so forth right now as it is. However, when we go in and we make sure that we tell people anything you say in this conversation, in this meeting, is not going to be specifically tied back to you. It's not going to be specifically tied back to your building. That is the opening line that I say every time in those things, and those office hours or one-on-ones that we have. And I think it's really important that you think very seriously about the implications of saying now that we're going to go back and tie this back to a specific building, or certainly not a specific person. I won't do that.
Right. I don't want you to disclose any
no.
confidences or have anything that identifies specific teachers, and I don't want them to fear for their job security or.
Well, but I even
that.
think
Right.
sometimes bringing forward information about specific buildings can do just that as well, because we may have one particular person who has a particular role in a building, and if we're talking about that particular person, the cat's out of the bag who we're discussing. So those kinds of things I don't think are appropriate. And again, I just I would caution you all with the.
So maybe if there is something, the problem is we don't know what you might have put in a site-specific report, and you're saying if you caution us against having one because that it may single out something that somebody said. I think the only way to do it is to maybe ask you in closed session for some frank comments about performance then of certain individuals, so that we can understand if there is a problem that you can't tell us in site-specific reports. So maybe is that the right answer, that we need to just go to closed session and ask you verbally to tell us?
I will tell you that I'm happy to provide you what is in the contract. Providing specific feedback on specific individuals is outside the scope of this agreement, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to do that. I'm not an evaluator for anyone in the district. I am coming in to be an auditor and to look at your programs throughout the district, not specific individuals. I don't think that would be appropriate.
So then,
And the board is evaluating one person, Eric. We're not evaluating, what's happening at Carpenter or Field. And I think I hear you saying, if I heard it correctly a few times, the site-specific reports will mirror what we've seen through the district audit.
That's correct. They essentially, our findings are district-wide. They roll up into the final report. And so a lot of, with a very few exceptions, with your SLC and with your preschool program, many of the findings are true across the board in these buildings. And so we didn't, like I said, we didn't find one building that's way out of line versus another building. What we're seeing here are trends that are happening throughout the district, and in a lot of ways that's a good thing, because we don't have one building that's a complete outlier. What we have is we're seeing some similar trends. So as we address those issues as a district, we can be doing that and make that cohesive change across the district, and it can apply to all the buildings.
Maybe I can ask you in a slightly different way. You put it in the RFP, you put it in the contract, right? Because I think you drafted both of those.
I didn't draft the RFP.
The response to the RFP. I apologize. Mm-hmm. The response to the RFP.
The RFP, we have a response to the RFP.
Yeah, the response to the RFP and the contract were drafted by you, and you put them in as a deliverable, right? And I work as a consultant myself, and I always check off that I'm delivering what I promised in the contract. Mm-hmm. If you put it in there, some people must find them valuable.
Well, as I indicated, about half of the districts, that we work with ask for them. About half of them don't. I mean, it's a district decision.
But we didn't ask. You put it in the RFP, so you told us that there was some value to it in some form. Otherwise, why did you put them in there?
I offer it as an option.
Because you think they're valuable in certain cases?
I think that some districts find them valuable, at least from my experience.
Do you personally think that they can be valuable?
In your case, I don't think that they would be, because they're going to mirror exactly what's in this report.
So you would not differentiate any, so maybe if I go back to the 3 out of 5 that you gave us, and by the way, is 5, do you know of any district that is a 5 around here, or have you seen a 5, or is it an aspirational
I think
5?
I think it's we're kind of moving toward a 5 is the reality, because we can always, we're always moving. And we're
But have
always
you seen a
evaluating.
5? Like, I'm just like,
I've
is
seen
it
some
possible to
district-
get to 5, or is aspirational?
Well, I mean, if 5 is perfect, the answer is no, because there's nobody who's ever going to get to perfection, right? But I think that's what we aspire to, moving in that direction.
And yes,
So 5
in my scale, 5 we're done.
Yeah,
So,
I think that was the perfection.
But you're never
answer.
done, is basically the answer?
Well, I think that what well, as a district, you always have to do that, right? I mean,
Right.
you're always you're looking at where you are, and then we're making changes, we're making adjustments, which is what you've done over the last 4 years from your 2018 audit, and now you're taking another look at this and saying, where are we now? We're gathering that data just like we do in our classrooms, and we're saying, here's where we are now. Now let's look ahead and plan and see where we're going from here. So presumably down the road, maybe it's 4 years, maybe it's 8 years, whatever the board decides, there may be another snapshot. Maybe it's of special education, maybe it's of the district as a whole, maybe it's something else. You're going to continue to do those as you go through.
So I just want to mention one of the reasons that I've been harping on this is because based on the response to the RFP, it made it seem like these site-specific reports were more important than what you're telling us today. There was a sentence that said these site-specific reports will be designed as a roadmap for individual school leadership teams to celebrate successes and address challenges uncovered on site.
Sure.
And then the other sentence that I had mentioned before, and I'll mention again, since you did mention that it wasn't in the contract, is scope of work. Page 4, it says ARP will provide all services outlined in the RFP in response to RFP. So, I mean, possibly that sentence should be deleted, and then this, not for us, but, in the future, I guess, if you're not going to provide all the services in the response to RFP. I mean, just part of the thing is that when the board voted, to basically enter into this contract, there were certain expectations, and now we're hearing, the week of this meeting that the documents that we reviewed, are not necessarily what, the agreement was in actuality. So it's just that, like, what can we rely on? And, that's what the issue. And like I said, I'm not blaming you because you were told not to do it. So it's totally not your fault.
I was listen. We do what's asked of us, and the site-specific reports were declined. And like I said, that's not something that is unusual either. I mean, we have a lot of districts, and I appreciate your thoughts on the wording because I will be going back and looking at that going forward. But I think that that's not something that's necessarily an outlier, if you will, for me, because we have a number of districts that come back to us and say we don't want that or we don't need that, even after the agreement is signed. So I think that going forward, that yes, I think there will be some wording changes
Right, to
going
that,
forward,
and then also
for
the
sure.
amendments only in writing. If you're going to agree on these oral amendments and things like that, then that should be something that people or parties to this contract should or would probably want to know.
So we're in a situation where we have a lot of schools for a district. I'm sure you've worked with
Yes.
districts that have 2
Yes.
or 1, and site-specific plans might not be as an important element. I don't want to speak for everybody else on this board, but it seems as if, from what I'm hearing, and for myself, I could speak for sure, that we may have had a different understanding of what a site-specific plan was going to be and how it was going to affect us, since we have so many schools, and it is so much more difficult to manage how our programs are run throughout those schools. So I think we put a little bit more weight on having those reports and not so much feeling that I know this is the answer you gave today. However, I don't know if I necessarily agree that it's just something that is slapped together or that is put together from some research that was just already done in general. I feel that when I read it, at least, that site-specific plan there was going to be a lot more effort given into each of our schools and a lot more attention given to each of our schools so that we knew exactly what each of our schools needed to do so that they can all end up being as closely aligned as possible. So I think just to help you understand where some of the frustration from these conversations are coming from, I think that's the indication that this board felt they were getting when they read the contract, when they read the verbiage, and when they agreed to what they were going to be paying for. And then having that not happen, whether it be because you were advised not to do it or whether you felt it wasn't necessary at that point for us to be hearing about it at this late of a date, we feel that, it may, we felt that it was more important than how it's being portrayed today. So I'm just trying to help clarify in the most polite way possible.
I appreciate that very much. And remember that the site-specific, I believe that they're referred to as site-specific reports. So we're basically reporting our findings. And again, as I mentioned, in your district in particular, a lot of the findings across from building to building are going to be very, very similar because you're seeing the same issues from building to building. That's not always the case in every district, but I appreciate your thoughts and your clarification on that, so thank you for that.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
And it doesn't have anything to do with the contract.
Okay.
Frankly, I will offer an opinion. Even if you did a site-specific reports, I wouldn't want to see them on the school board. I'd want the student services director to see them, and I'd want the superintendent of education to see them. I wouldn't want to see them. I want to see what's happening across the board in the district, and you showed it to us. And I appreciate that.
Thank you.
But years ago, we had a terrible problem in this district, and I know we've gotten better because of Dr. Frost and handing off special ed students. One of the reasons some years ago that I ran for school board was because I overheard a teacher say, I can't wait to get rid of this problem to District 207. And I couldn't breathe. So, did you look at that and how we go from Roosevelt to Lincoln, Washington to Lincoln, Carpenter to Emerson with special ed students? What are the meetings, the preparation? I like I said, I know we've gotten eons better than it used to be.
Well, I can't specifically speak to what it used to be, but what I can tell you is what we observe now. And I can tell you that when I go into districts, one of the biggest issues that we often see is the transition piece, whether it's transitioning from elementary to middle or from middle to high school and so forth. We were, frankly, fairly pleasantly surprised that those transition issues were not issues here. Now, I can't tell you that every single student has a smooth transition. I mean, that's not, I'm sure that's not the case. However, what the pieces that are in place here, there are policies in place, there are specific actions that are taken by the school that the student is leaving and the school that the student is going to. We saw those in place. There has been, I'm not sure if it's this administrative team or previous administrative teams that did this, but there are good policies in place that did that, and we did not see the evidence of poor transitions.
Oh, great. That's good news. Thank you.
Because that would have been part of my report, I can promise you, if we had seen that.
Yeah, Larry, I appreciate your perspective. I think I can see Carol's point where, the contract said this and that was what the expectation was thought it was going to be. But you can see how if one school maybe wasn't doing as well, and some of these parents would be like, oh my gosh, I need to go to this school now because my school is not doing these services. And I don't see the benefit of that, where we're looking at a district-wide our program or our continuum of services. So thank you. Do you have something?
No, I guess I just have going backwards to the report.
Sure.
So I understand that the data, when you did your surveys with the parents and teachers, that this was confidential, and was there any sort of consent form where that it indicated that this would be maintained just private to your company, or no?
No, there was no consent form or anything like that. I believe, and I'd have to go back and look at the language that we put in the email, I believe that we said that the responses would remain confidential. I think that we said that in the email. both to the teachers and to the parents. So I guess you can, interpret that as you will, I guess. I suspect that some parents might read that to mean that it's not going to be shared beyond our organization. Others might say, as long as my name's not tied to it, it's confidential. So we just say that it's going to remain confidential.
So how do you incorporate that data specifically into your report?
Well, it's the same kind of process that we utilize as we're looking at, as we're having conversations with teachers across the district as well, right? We have an opportunity to sit down and have conversations with those teachers and hear from them sort of what their strengths are, the challenges are, and so forth. Same kind of thing. We utilize the data in the that we get from those surveys in a very similar way. We're looking at those big trends, right? We're not calling out, this person said this and this person said that. We're looking at those trends, and that's what both our observations and our recommendations are based on, is those trends that we see both in our conversations and also in the surveys.
So I have the email, Nikki, if you wanted me to.
Oh, you
answer
have your it,
question.
okay.
Yeah, I just opened it. So it does say that, as it says, ARP is conducting a parent survey of all parents of students with special needs. This confidential and anonymous parent survey is open beginning, today, Monday, February 7, and will close Wednesday, February 16. So that's what it said. It told parents that it was going to be, confidential and anonymous.
Okay.
That's all.
So then if I'm removing the results from the question, I would just like to know what we asked them. That would be helpful.
Oh, absolutely. We can do that. In fact, I think we shared that all with Dr. Frost ahead of time, the questions and so forth. In fact, we asked if
The link
those
still
questions were
works, so
Okay.
I could email
Does it
to
still
them.
work?
It does.
Oh, well,
I could take it right now.
I guess we could.
Just
I'd be happy to share that with you, because that's a Word document that we can share with you. There's no confidentiality in the questions, of course.
I guess I would just like to know how many respondents took this survey. Was it a small portion? Was it a large portion? Getting as much parent input coming into this board special education was one of the top priorities of parents in the district, and I want to make sure that their voices were heard through this survey and that we're taking their feedback. If they took the time to take this survey, and that their data is being incorporated into this report appropriately, and if it's quantitative type data, such as Likert scale questions of on a scale of 1 to 5, how satisfied are you with our the special ed services in the district? It would be helpful for us to know, even anonymously, the majority of parents, over 80% of the parents in the district, ranked it as a 5, or is it qualitative type data where it's describe your experiences within the district, et cetera, and was anything done with that qualitative data? I'm assuming, I guess I don't know because I haven't seen it. I haven't seen the survey.
It's both.
It's both, yes.
Okay. So then when you analyze the data for your report, do any of those quantitative questions get pulled in?
The quantitative questions and the qualitative questions are both the same, right? We're looking at, again, those overall trends in the district. So yes, they are being brought in. So we're taking those, for parents, for instance, we're taking the comments that we have from the PT3 group. We're taking it from the parents who came to our a parent meeting or parent session and on Zoom, and then we're also taking a look at the surveys themselves.
Okay.
But I think you're saying you wanted some quantitative data in the audit. Is that what kind of, 80% agreed with?
If we surveyed, people take the time to fill this out, and I guess I would just have liked to have seen, this is like the actual data we got from parents and or teachers. But if it was phrased in that, we're just using your data confidentially in a way that the methodology can't be shared with us, that is, I guess, a little just frustrating to me as somebody who works with data all the time. So that's just where I'm at.
Yeah, I would just hop on. I'd agree with Nikki there in terms of you're not going to give anything away if we see the kind of the summarized results of numerical-based
that's up
questions.
to you all.
Yeah,
I mean, that's up to you all. If you decide as a board that that's something that you want, we can do that. But again, I would. I know that the superintendent suggested some conversations happen around that, and so I will wait to hear get direction, I guess, before I move forward on any of that.
Okay. then yeah, I won't go back to some of that then. I do, though, I was in the middle of asking earlier, and I think the conversation got sidetracked, you know, this idea of a 5, I'm still trying to get, is it aspirational, or do you see districts at 5? I'm just trying to level set what your 3 out of 5 was in my mind
So
to help me.
yeah,
'Cause-
so I understand
and maybe
what
I
you're
should
saying.
get back up a little bit, because, you know, when you get an audit, right, you approach it, you bring your professional skepticism, you're trying to give a sense of comfort, right, to us as a board that what we have in place is reasonable for services around special education. I think if you're giving us a 3 out of 5, I need to understand the scale so I can see, am I comfortable right now with being a 3 out of 5?
Sure.
I still want to, you know, we certainly most probably want to be higher than the 3 out of 5, but again, I'm trying to say, can we ever get to a 5? What's your scale there when you said that?
Sure. So I think that the concept there, and again, if I was going to do a full analysis of your question on a scale of 1 to 5 or 0 to 5, I guess I need to take a little bit more time to define what each one of those levels are rather than come back with a 3, I suppose. But my reason for saying a 3 is that when I look at where you were in 2018 when that original audit took place and to where you are now, I'm not sure I would be very comfortable as a parent or as a board member with where you were 4 years ago. As someone coming in and looking at that today, I think I'm much more comfortable with where you are today because I can see all of those components as someone who's coming in and looking at that. So you have made a lot of strides, and that's why I suggested it's a 3 out of 5 because you're getting there. You're moving in that direction. I'm not sure that 5 is. I'm not sure if a 5 is going to be perfect or not. I'm not sure if that was the intent of the question.
So is a 3 you're reasonable, you're average?
So Gareth, since I made the scale, I'll tell you what I was thinking.
Okay.
When we were here 5-6 years ago, I wouldn't put us at a 0 because we had a program.
You have a program.
So I put us at a 1. Me personally, I put us at a 1 because we heard just way too much that we were not doing what we should be. And when I set the scale, 1 through 5, I was thinking to myself that 5 is perfection, and you never reach perfection. So in my opinion, 4 would be where I want to be. Always striving to get to 5, never being able to get to 5 because 5 is perfection and will never be perfect. And if we ever thought we were perfect and we stopped, we'd be failing because we still want to strive to be more perfect. So in my opinion, 5 would never be reached, but 4 would be where I would want to live. Always striving to get to 5, trying to keep doing more to get to 5, even knowing that it's just right out of my reach. Because I think if you continue to strive for 5, then you're always going to be doing better for your students. So the way I looked at my scale, and when I got your answer of we're at a 3, I felt a lot more comfortable than I was 5 years ago because we made great strides from a 1 to a 3 in a short period of time. And most people will think that 5 years is not a short period of time, but to implement a lot of what we did, I think 5 years is reasonable. I know for people who have children who have, special needs and have all these, have IEPs and everything else that is needed, 5 years is nowhere near quick enough. We need to do it much quicker because in 5 years, their students are gone. They're out of this district and they've been failed. And to those parents, I severely apologize for anything that they may have been suffering, due to what we may have been 5 years ago. I'm hoping that very quickly, and not another 5 years to gain one more point. I'm hoping that we can take your audit, and your audit is good enough to help us get to 4 so that we can then continually just strive for 5. That's my theory of my 1 through 5.
That's good. So I should know when Thomas explained his scale, you're still good with the 3?
I am still good with a 3 because I think you did make a lot of great strides in there. I agree. Maybe the 0 wasn't a fair assessment of where you were 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh,
because
no, I thought it was perfect.
Well, I would say that the reason I would probably say 0 is, yes, you did have a program in place, but you were missing a lot of critical components to that program.
And we had to move some people.
Yes. And I think that you have made, again, you brought in a new team, you brought in some new administrators and so forth to make those strides. Dr. Frost has a great deal of experience and was able to move that, and that wasn't always easy, and that wasn't always popular. I know that too. And so the movement is, I think, significant, and I think it is moving from that to that 3, I think is significant, I guess is what I want to say.
But
but you still have room to go.
So we're reasonable right now, you would say, in terms of our services and what we provide.
Yes.
4 is where we aspire to be, because, well, no, actually we aspire to be a 5, but we're likely to end up at a 4 because we'll never hit the perfection. And that's what you've given us a roadmap.
Maybe 4.5 even.
4.5, maybe.
Let's
we'll
shoot for 4.5.
But I'm good. One of the things you want out of an audit is comfort, and that's what I was trying to get at.
Yes.
Going back, but asking it in a slightly different way, which is where I was heading earlier, was around the buildings. At the end of the day, are all buildings a 3, or are some 2.5, some 3.5? Is there and not asking you to name the buildings, I'm just saying, do you if you think of all 9 sites, would you rate them all 3s, or would you give some slightly above, some slightly below?
So I suppose there are probably little variations there, but I think they were all hovering around a 3. And the reason I say that is, again, going back to what I said earlier, was that what we were seeing in these buildings was not major outliers, one way or the other, on the scale. What we were seeing is a lot of continuity. The issues that we were seeing, there are common issues, common themes, if you will, throughout the buildings. So when we talk about things like Tier 2, for example, and Tier 3, we're having those conversations or seeing those things across buildings. It wasn't that we had a bunch of people in this place who didn't understand MTSS, but everybody else did. We had those conversations across the board. So I would say that most of your buildings are probably hovering around a 3. I would say that, as I indicated in the report, we did recommend some changes in one of the buildings and some additional direction that needed to be had. I would say that maybe needs a little bit more work than the others.
Okay. No,
Jefferson probably needs more focus.
Yes. That's exactly what I would advise.
So, okay, so that's helpful. That gives me that gives the kind of the comfort level. But then I see the report in 3 phases. I see the comfort level, the audit, then I see the findings and recommendations, which is kind of the current state, future state kind of view. The future state, and you give us kind of a roadmap to get there as well. I guess one of the things that I'd like a little bit more for you to give a little bit more commentary on is data collection and progress monitoring. At the end of the day, you can collect a lot of data, but you also have to invest time to collect that data. And so you end up losing instructional time versus as a balance, as a trade-off. And I know, for example, we have a reading curriculum. The running records take the teachers forever, and they lose days of instructional time versus something like a kind of a CBM type of progress monitoring tool where they read for 2 or 3 minutes, and the teacher gets a good read, and they do that 3 or 4 times a year. Do you have any specific recommendations about what we should be doing? What's best in class right now to maximize instruction time, but but also maximize data collection? So it's kind of like that. How do we balance that trade-off? Do we need make any changes to do that in terms of curriculum or progress monitoring or tools or something around that nature?
No, I understand your question completely, and I appreciate it. I think that I'm not suggesting that there be any changes made to curriculum. That's not something that we would recommend. We did not see issues of curriculum issues, that type of thing, that stood out. As far as data collection goes, in your district right now, you do have there are systems in place and there are programs in place for teachers to collect that data and input that data so that they are storing the data, if you will, and collecting it and storing it. But there's lots of different ways to do that. Of course, we have our regular assessments that need to be done for a variety of different reasons. Either that's a component of curriculum, that's a requirement by the state, what have you. There are lots of different reasons why we have those kinds of assessments. What we really see is when we look at trending across a lot of places, and including some states that are moving completely to this, is progress monitoring is sort of the way of the future in a lot of these ways. There are wonderful progress monitoring tools that are out there, some of which your teachers are already using. Some of those are formal progress monitoring tools. Others are more district-driven, I don't want to say created, but I guess district-developed progress monitoring tools, or even individual classroom progress monitoring tools. But as we look at that, we see that there are that progress monitoring piece where you, as you said, you're taking those little snapshots multiple times. It's not that we're stopping instruction to do an exam. It's that we're looking at those students and collecting that progress monitoring data. That's exactly what we do when you look at students as we're moving through the tiers in MTSS, right? We're continuously progress monitoring. We're doing it on a regular and systematic basis to determine if the interventions that we're using for the students in the particular tier are successful or not successful. And based on that progress monitoring data, we're making a decision. Are they moving to the next tier? Are they staying where they are? Are we changing the program that we're using? What have you? We do the same thing in special education too. We're looking at that and saying, okay, now that the student has an IEP, here are their IEP goals. Here are what we need to, how we need to be supporting that student. Now, this is a program that we're going to use to do that, and here's what we're going to do. But we have to be continuously progress monitoring, and we are, because that program on the surface may look like it's going to work phenomenally for that student, but in practice it doesn't. And so then we have to go back to the drawing board. Maybe that's going back to revisiting the IEP, if it's depending on what it is, or maybe that's going back with the teacher and saying, what do we need to put in place to, is there a different program that we can use? Is there a different intervention that we should be exploring? And so forth. So sometimes that's something that needs to be changed in the IEP itself. Sometimes it's something that we need to pivot on when we are in the classroom setting with the teacher who needs to be making those adjustments as they're going forward. But progress monitoring is really the way to go forward with this.
Okay. And is there...
Okay, wait 1 minute. Can we, I know,
Yes, ma'am.
we've been talking about this for several hours now. It's 10:20. Respectfully, he gave us his email. These guys said there's more conversation to be had. Can we just, close it out? All of us.
That's a little unfair on me, because I was the last one to get to ask my questions. So.
I didn't ask mine yet, but is there,
Okay.
so
Oh,
make sure there's questions on the audit. I think this was a little beyond, one
No,
of the
one of the
question on the
recommendations
audit.
was around data. So it was to me, it's pretty critical, right?
Okay.
That we hit, and are we doing the best thing that we can for data, or that was my question.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at the data pieces that are in place, there are programs in place to collect that data and so forth. But there is progress monitoring is the method of data collection that's being used in the districts. Now, is everyone using that with the same level of fidelity? No. But that is the policy, that is the plan, that is the program, and again, with additional instruction and training, we would get all of our teachers moving in line.
Okay. I got one last area of question, and that's the the nature of how to implement. Transformation is very difficult, right? It's not easy, and there's a lot of recommendations on here. In education, or what you see is the kind of, when people are implementing, is kind of the best kind of like project management methodology, where people hire project managers to help them implement. What do you see in other districts that you've helped audit? How do they transition to make this a reality, right? That's kind of the next step this board has to consider. It's like what recommendations we want to pick up and then how to implement them.
Sure.
Could you give us some feedback as to what you've seen as terms of best practices around that in other districts?
Sure, absolutely. I don't think that I necessarily suggest that a project manager per se be brought in to do that. I think that that's something that really is left to the administrative team in the district, because they really are in a lot of ways your project management team. And so I think that a lot of that is going to fall on your district leadership, on the superintendent sort of setting the tone for what's going to happen and how that's going to happen in consultation with you all on the board, but then also directing the director of student services and others in the administrative team on how they need to move forward with that as well. So I don't know that I've ever heard of a district hiring a project manager per se. And I don't know that would be, I guess my opinion would be to use your dollars more effectively by putting dollars into addressing the issues rather than hiring another person to do that.
But I guess, do they tend to give status updates then to the board? Is there certain, what are the best practices that you see?
Yeah, so what I like to see, and that's one of the reasons that we usually put in in the proposal, and I do this again, I mentioned earlier, I do it for all the districts we work with, is sort of having that quarterly kind of touch base, if you will, I guess, for lack of a better term. And so, I mentioned in there that the board may consider actually having someone come in and do that on a quarterly basis, sort of that kind of monitoring piece, if you will. I know that's that's not a good word in education a lot of times, but having somebody come in alongside you and just making sure that some of those goals are being achieved and so forth on a quarterly basis. Some districts choose to do it, some don't, but it's something that we suggest. Now, I think that there does need to be, and again, that varies from board to board, when progress reports are made back to the board. I don't necessarily think that that's something that needs to happen on a monthly basis, but probably a quarterly basis for some of these recommendations, and for some of them are going to be much more long-term, and so maybe 6-8 months down the road is more of an appropriate time. So again, it depends on the board and kind of how often you want those updates, but I think that for many of them a quarterly update or quarterly check-in or semi-annual check-in is appropriate.
And like a traffic light kind of slide, green, red, we're on track.
Yeah, something like
red,
that.
we're off track. Amber, we're somewhere between. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, you're welcome.
You good?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
All right. All right, in honor of time, I have 2 questions, but I will ask you online or on email, and I will forward it to the board.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other audit questions?
I just want to say I don't want Eric to regret having done this. We're glad that you actually did it, because we were talking about having the audit done, and it was just one of those ideas that was thrown out there, so it was good that you actually, spearheaded us doing that. No, right, exactly. Yeah. Even though I feel Eric's dying inside as we going through the night. Maybe we should have. It's too late now, but maybe it would have been appropriate for a special meeting, instead, but now it's too late. Anyway, and we do have other things to do tonight, substantive things. So.
Okay. No, I appreciate you saying that,
Thank
though.
you.
That's good. Yes. And thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all very much.
For answering our questions and being patient with us. Okay.
Thank you all.
Would you be okay if we don't let Dr. Frost leave us?
Thank you all very much.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Todd. Okay. All right, let's move on. We are on A7, which is the consent agenda. And when we look at that, the one thing we're going to pull out is policy 2:230. Anything else anyone needs to pull out of there?
Just so that the board has full understanding, the reason we're pulling 2:230 is that Gareth caught that some of the language had changed in terms of what we had agreed on and what was in the final piece. So we wanted to catch that before we did a second reading. But also 2:230 is up in the new press, 109, which Phyllis, Gareth, and I will be meeting out probably in about a month from now. So it probably just makes sense for us to revise it then and bring it back to the board instead of having to do it twice.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right, anyone else need anything pulled out of there? Okay. All right, I think we're ready for the action item.
I move that the Board of Education and Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge, Niles, Illinois, approve the consent agenda for May 19, 2022, which includes bills, payroll, and benefits, approval of financial update for the period ending March 31st, 2022, second reading and approval of changes to policy 2:140, 4:140, and 4:20, approval of intergovernmental agreement for shared vision, O&M services, and destruction of audio closed recordings. None.
I second.
All right, Larry had the motion, Phyllis had the second. Any discussion from the board? Okay, let's take a roll call.
Sellis?
Yes.
Pearl?
Yes.
Riles?
Yes.
Wojtovich?
Yes.
Lubinsky, yes. Kennedy?
Yes.
Soto?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Now we'll move to A8. We have minutes from the closed session and regular meeting in April 21st. Anyone? I think we can make the motion and then see if there's any discussion.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the minutes from the closed meeting on April 21st, 2022, and the regular meeting on April 21st, 2022.
Second. All right, so Phyllis had the motion, I had the second. Any conversation on the minutes?
I just had one addition. Sorry for not bringing this up sooner. And I might have missed it, but in the regular session, I was wondering if either Phyllis or Natasha, someone could add the discussion about the FOIA compliance. You know, not a big thing, but like one sentence. I didn't see it in the ones for the prior meeting before, and those minutes are already approved, but if they could just be added this time, then I'll vote yes.
Okay. All right, anything else? Okay, I think we're ready.
Sellis?
Yes, with that one change to the minutes.
Okay. Riles?
Yes.
Sotos?
Yes.
Kennedy?
Yes.
Lubinsky, yes. Wojtovich?
Present.
Pearl?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Now we have other information. Eric, you're up.
Sure, thank you. I don't think I need to comment on any of these. Just real quick, I noticed at the bottom of the agenda, it does say that our next meeting is tonight. It actually is not until June, but we are meeting at Lincoln at that time. So just so that we're clear, I think it's June 21st, I believe is the date. June 23rd, thank you. But that's all I have.
Not that it matters, but I will not be here. June 23rd.
Actually, while you mentioned that, a colleague of mine is retiring. I have to be at that event that night, so I won't be here. So
We're out of town on baseball.
I might be out of town also.
I will know soon.
Okay, well, let us look at the 23rd meeting.
Sorry, guys. I didn't mean to get that rolling. I just.
thanks for reminding me on that one.
Okay. Eric and I will be here. No. Okay. All right, well, we will touch base on that. It's always tricky in the summer. Okay. All right, anyone have any new business? Item A10.
Yeah, I've got one item, and I mentioned this to Eric earlier, was to get an update basically on the construction, every month, and hopefully only through maybe September. So hopefully maybe even August. But maybe just a one-pager telling us, like that traffic light thing I just mentioned to the like green, we're on track, red, we're on track, and we really need a backup plan pretty quickly. And by building, right? Because I think that's important, because some buildings may have different issues from others as we go through them, and maybe just a kind of an update by building as well of any, from a governance standpoint, to understand if there's any major change orders that have been happening, so we've got an idea of any additional spend that might be happening, both positive or maybe there's some savings. I've seen change orders with savings, although they seem to be rarer usually in construction. So that's basically the ask, and I think, Eric, you seem to be open to it.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good idea, and what I thought maybe is on the agenda, we'll put in place of COVID update, we'll just put construction update, and that'll be a regular item, hopefully only
For
through
the
September.
next few months,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That brings up a second point. I do think as we, not at this point in time, but I think as we look towards the fall, you know, especially maybe our August meeting, we really should consider you know, evaluating where we are with COVID at that time. Most respiratory illnesses peak in the late fall, early winter, so thinking about reevaluating strategies, adding layered mitigations back should they be necessary at that time. But I want us to be ahead of that and have you know, defined metrics of when we might need to pull different levers of different things. I don't think any of that needs to be talked about today or next month even, but again, kind of getting prepared for the next school year. Hopefully things will be better, but just in case.
But I think having that laid out is kind of
Yes,
what,
I think
yeah.
that would give parents a lot of comfort.
Right.
As well as, you know, staff and everybody else who's in the building on a day-to-day basis.
Right, yep. Phyllis, did you want to talk about that tonight?
No, thank you.
I was just making sure. Okay. All right, so that's something. And the other thing, I think Gareth mentioned, Larry went around to the schools, which Larry likes to do, goes around to the schools. And I think you had mentioned you might want to go around to the schools.
Yeah, you know, obviously there's only 9 school days left, so I don't think I'm going to make it around. Maybe I'll get to 1 or 2 if possible, but I obviously didn't. I asked Eric what the kind of procedure would be, just to talk to the principal, introduce myself. We kind of put that off with the pandemic, right? We said we weren't going to go and disrupt what was a very difficult time, and also introduce more risk by going into the schools ourselves than was necessary. Now that's all. Not totally behind us, but it seems like it's a comfortable level. I wouldn't mind doing that, and given that 2 of us could go together, it would be most probably less disruptive, and I want to be as minimally as possible. So I was talk to a principal, maybe meet a couple of staff and say hi, and make sure we're visible in the community and in the schools again. So if anybody wants to come with me,
I'd be happy to join you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to bring that up, so if, other folks want to do that, didn't want someone to say, oh, did Garrett do that, and can I do that? So I just want to throw it out if anyone else wants to do that, or if we want to, as a board, look into the fall, more strategically do it. I know when we, I think, Carol, when we first came on, we talked about some community involvement, and it didn't get off the ground, and then I think and then the pandemic, certainly, so.
We are doing a lot of things. I think part of it is we don't really fill everybody in on what we're doing. I know Larry does a lot. I hopped on a Zoom and Eric happened to be there. E. Olson was on the Zoom about reducing waste. So I think part of it too is also maybe talking about what we do. And if you are visiting a school, then yeah, it's good to maybe partner up so that, we don't have to
I
have
usually
10
go
visits, right?
on it was school nurses day. I saw one principal. I'll usually tell the principal, I'll tell the secretary I don't need to see the principal. They're too busy. I see the school nurse. I often talk to the crossing guards. We had a proclamation from the city council the other night, and I was there while they made a proclamation for the crossing guards. And these are people that don't get much recognition. And we should go see those people. I visited a couple of custodians. Lord knows they've been some of the most important people in this district the last 2 years. But all too often, sometimes we walk by them. And we need to spend some time with those people. So that's what I do.
Just on a positive note, Field had their school carnival, and Larry was in the raffle, and I was handing out prizes for the raffle. We couldn't find the microphone, but it was fun. Parents were there, kids were there, they had a good time, and so that's usually when I take the opportunity to talk to the teachers and the other parents, and I will say people publicly, but they know I have not been on school grounds because I don't want to be bombarded, but every once in a while I do make an exception, and the Field Carnival was fun, right? You saw there were a lot of people
great.
there.
I didn't win. But it was
The Bears thing was fun at
super.
Field?
The carnival was great at Field. My daughter did Girls on the Run, and yesterday they did their fundraiser at the end, and they raised over $800 selling popsicles outside field. So that was great as well. So there's definitely a lot more happening.
Oh, there definitely
and
is.
$800 on popsicles?
Yeah, those little frozen things.
Wow, that's a lot of popsicles.
I shouldn't tell you what I paid for them because it wasn't that much. I can tell you it was a pretty good win that they
And
they
actually,
got.
Emerson had
They
their
were-
orchestra and had their like year-end kind of concert, and we went to that, and that was also very normal. It was beautiful to listen to, and to see these kids grow from field to Emerson.
I loved it.
It's amazing.
I go
That
every
first
year.
band concert. Whew.
It's
So
amazing.
there's a lot going on. I don't know if the problem is knowing things and when they're happening. I don't know if there's like a way that we can, that we have like a calendar, like we know when the PTO events are, like, and as a board we can subscribe to as long as we're all not showing up, and I guess as long as we don't talk to each other. But it would just be good to know, like, have a calendar kind of linked into our Google Calendar so we know what's going on.
And we talked about that a few years ago, and I think because you know your school, but not if your student's not at a different school, what's happening or what event's going on. So, yeah, we can certainly talk about that, but I don't think we need to make any decisions. I just wanted to throw that out today. So, okay. All right. So, is there a motion to, all right. So when the board is, going to adjourn for a closed meeting. The administration has asked us to go into closed session under 2C6, the setting of a price for sale or lease of a property owned by the district.
So moved.
Okay.
Second, okay, my mic was off. I'm seconding it.
All right, so Gareth had the motion, Carol had the second. Let's vote to go into closed.
Wojtovich.
Yes.
Riles.
Yes.
Pearl.
Yes.
Lubinsky, yes. Sotos.
Yes.
Celis.
Yes.
Kennedy.
Yes.
All right, we're going into closed. Yeah, fine.
Okay. Okay, the board was in closed session for about 35 minutes discussing, let's go to, 2C6, which is the setting of a price for sale or lease of a property owned by the district. And so now does someone want to make the motion for the authorization of the sale of district property?
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge, Niles, Illinois, adopt resolution number 1290, authorizing the sale of real property with a minimum sale price of $1.6 million and earnest money of $20,000.
Wait a minute.
So I think we need to update the motion. I think the earnest money was $80,000.
I'm sorry, I'll take the friendly amendment. I meant to say 80,000.
Okay. All right, so 1.6 million is the minimum bid and $80,000.
Second.
Okay. Gareth had the motion, Carol had the second. Okay, is there any discussion from the board?
I'm just going to say real quickly that I'm going to be voting present, not because I still think I want to sell the property. I just was not 100% in agreement with some of the terms. That's all.
Okay. All right, let's take a vote.
Pearl.
Yes.
Celis.
Yes.
Lubinsky, yes. Riles.
Yes.
Wojtovich.
Yes.
Kennedy.
Yes.
Sotos.
Present.
Okay, motion carries.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Okay. Adam?
Just because you guys, you were talking about it, and I will we'll work with legal to start publishing notices on Monday. So everything we set up was to approve at the June 23rd board meeting, and part of the notices need to be about the approval and about the opening of the bids. So if we're not going to do a June 23rd board meeting.
So I think Eric and I will connect on that.
We have to do a meeting before a certain period, so.
We have till July 18th, which is 60 days, so we have some.
So I think we're either going to reschedule the June board meeting to a date that all the board members can attend,
Okay.
or we will do a special meeting so that everybody can be here. It won't be on the 23rd, because I think at least,
But are we able to do that before Monday morning so that I can put those.
Do what?
Oh,
you
can
wanna
we-
know the
We
date?
need a date before Monday morning, so we can,
But we've got more leeway with the newspaper timeline, if the June 23rd meeting is moved, right? If that is no longer the date.
little bit. Because
I
we
mean,
need to
we're
go
all
three,
here. Might as well
we
take
need
it.
to go
Let's pick a
3
date, yeah.
consecutive weeks of publication.
I don't have my calendar with me, the calendar that I need.
So you don't have it with you?
Is everybody in town the week of July 4th?
Oh, gosh.
No?
That would be bad.
Okay. I'm just saying that, like, some people go away,
I
some
think,
people
I think we
stay.
should
Like,
still,
if you're in town, it's easy.
I think we should
It's
still live in the June world.
not- You want to live in the June world? Okay.
And Adam, is it better if we do it before the 23rd? Yeah.
Yes, I could.
And is it a special meeting or just moving the June 23rd to June 16th?
My first choice would be to move the regular meeting because we have several other items.
Yeah, then I'd prefer June 30 because I don't want a regular meeting so close to this one, right? And you probably don't either. So does
That's
June
fine.
30 work or no?
What day of the week?
It's a Thursday.
Just
June
one week
30
later.
might work for me. But like I said, I don't have I could let you guys know as soon as I get home, but
Yeah.
June 30 might work for me.
But I just want to make sure I'm hearing again. Do we need to be before, is it better to be before June 23rd as opposed to June 30, or both are fine?
Both are fine.
Okay.
So is just kind of asking, I think the 30th tricky for me, but is the whole week of the 20th out? I know you said, or is it just the 23rd? Is there just like, is the 21st or the 22nd?
It would be a bad week.
It's the whole week?
I potentially have some things with work that would need to be in New York, but then I got this retirement party. If I'm in New York, I can dial in and vote. If I'm this one night of the 23rd, I can't, but I would, so don't,
So the 23rd, but another day that week could work?
could work, even if I wasn't here in town, I would dial in, because you need more people to, as long as you got do you need an in-person quorum right now with the
And
governors?
actually, on the 23rd, I can
Emergency
dial
order?
in too.
So, no, I don't think.
I'm available on the 23rd. I'm just not available to physically be here, so I might be able to dial in on the 23rd.
I can't dial in
I
on the
think at
23rd.
least 2 board members can.
Yeah.
And then there was 2 maybes. I think Phyllis and Gareth were both a no for the 23rd, and Carol and Tom were maybes.
I'm definitely a no for that 23rd.
Okay.
But any other day that week, even if I wasn't in town, I would be able to dial in. But again, is a physical quorum still, is it required now?
It's not required at this moment, right? But it depends on whether or not the disaster declaration will be renewed for another 30 days, right? If we're looking at the end
Which
of June as the
It will,
relevant
we're
time
in Cook
period.
County.
Yeah, but we're also in election season.
Pritzker doesn't know how to do anything else but to sign that every month.
Right.
so.
Okay, we
So-
are on camera.
Gareth, I'm with you as well. I can dial in and potentially be here that week. I'll know better when I get home.
Okay, so Carol, that week is out for you?
Let's see.
And Nikki, is
so-
that week out for you?
It's fine. I mean, is it better if we do some sort of scheduling poll? Because we're
Yeah.
getting late
No,
here.
I thought we could just, I hear you.
But that's fine. We just need do we need 4 people?
I mean, the
physically
third, is the
present
third,
here?
you
Oh,
said
no,
the
no, no, we
30th
don't need
is
them.
not good
Right,
for you,
right.
Denise.
How many do we need that day?
We need 5 board members.
We need 5 board members.
That day.
5 board members to affirmatively vote yes.
Okay, all right,
And
here's the deal.
potentially 4
I
in
will do a
person.
quick doodle poll tonight. Please answer it first thing in the morning, because then we need to schedule this. So the deal is we can adjourn tonight, but please, you got to answer it in the morning, and then we can connect and get it scheduled.
Yeah, and then Adam would like to get it by Monday morning, so.
I'd like to publish the newspaper.
Right. So if we connect tomorrow, we can meet that deadline.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds
Phyllis, do you want to continue discussing it now?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all right. Gareth had the motion, Nikki had the second, and it is 11:16, May 18th, and we are closing, May 19th, yes, and we are closing up.